Aloha mai kako and good morning. This is the November 4th, 2020 Land Use Commission meeting, and it is being held using interactive conference technology, linking video conference participants and other interested individuals from the public via the Zoom internet conferencing platform. We're doing this in order to comply with state and county official operational directives during the COVID-19 pandemic. Members of the public are viewing the meeting via the Zoom webinar platform. For all of our meeting participants, I'd like to stress to everyone the importance of speaking slowly, clearly, and directly into your microphone. Before speaking, it's helpful for a court reporter if you state your name prior to speaking. Please also be aware that all meeting participants are being recorded on the digital record of this Zoom meeting. Your continued participation is your implied consent to be part of the public record of this event. If you do not wish to be part of the public record, you should exit the meeting now. The Zoom conferencing technology allows the parties and each participating commissioner individual remote access to the meeting proceedings via our personal digital devices. Please also note that due to matters entirely outside of our own control, occasional disruptions to connectivity may occur for one or more members of the meeting at any given time. If such disruptions occur, please let us know, and please be patient as we try to restore the audiovisual signals so we can effectively conduct our business during the pandemic. My name is Jonathan Likeke Scheuer. I am currently serving as the LUC chair. Along with me, Commissioners Axon, Chang, Okuda, and Wong, our LUC Executive Officer Daniel Ordenker, LUC Chief Planner Scott Derrickson, Chief Clerk Riley Hakoda, our Deputy Attorney General Lauren Chun and Bill Weinhoff, our court reporter Jean McManus are all on the island of Oahu. Commissioner Cabral of Hawaii Island is calling in from California. Commissioner Ohigashi is on Maui, and Commissioner Giovanni will be joining the meeting late from Kauai. We currently have 8 seated commissioners of a possible 9. Earlier, we did confirm that all of the members of the Land Use Commission have audio signal available to them. With that, I'm going to note that because we're waiting for Commissioner Giovanni's attendance, we're going to have to recess, I believe. Is that correct, Mr. Ordenker?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so I apologize to all participants and members of the public, but we are going to need to recess until we're joined by Commissioner Giovanni, which is supposed to be at 9:30 a.m. I will note for the record also that in the Q&A, I note that Mr. Mike Moran and Representative Tina Wildberger have apparently submitted testimony on our next agenda item, and I will ask the Chief Clerk to use this opportunity to see whether that can be provided to the parties. With that, we're going to go into recess. Good morning, we are back in session. Aloha again. This is the November 4th, 2020 Land Use Commission meeting. We just came out of a recess, waiting the arrival of Commissioner Giovanni. Our first order of business is the adoption of the October 7th and 8th, 2020 minutes. Mr. Hakoda or Mr. Derrickson, has there been any written testimony on the adoption of the minutes?
Mr. Chair, this is Riley. No written testimony on the minutes.
Okay. Is there any member of the public who's attending in the attendee room of this Zoom meeting who wishes to testify solely regarding the adoption of our last minutes? If so, use the raise hand function on your Zoom meeting, and I will admit you, swear you in, and allow you to offer testimony on the adoption of the minutes. Seeing none, are there any comments or corrections on the minutes, members? If not, is there a motion to adopt? Commissioner Cabral.
I I will make a motion to adopt the minutes of October 7th and 8th. Was that it?
Yes,
Thank you.
this is. Thank you. Motion made by Commissioner Cabral, seconded by Commissioner Ohigashi. I will comment for the record that it brought up my PTSD to have to read through the minutes of that meeting, but persevered. Any other comments? If not, Mr. Orodenko, will you please roll call the commission?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Cabral,
Yes.
Commissioner Ohigashi,
Aye.
Commissioner Axon,
Aye.
Commissioner Wong,
Aye.
Commissioner Chang,
Aye.
I already did that. Commissioner Okuda,
Yes. Yes.
who am I missing? Commissioner Giovanni,
Aye.
Chair Schreier.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion passes unanimously.
Up too late watching election returns, Mr. Ordenker?
Yeah, you could say that.
Nevertheless, I'm going to have you go over our meeting schedule as the next agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next meeting will be tomorrow, once again by Zoom on Hawaii Island Land Trust motions to amend. November 18th is somewhat up in the air, but we have Palama Lanai EA adoption and any further matters with Kihei High School if necessary. On November 19th, we have the C. Brewer bifurcation status hearing. And then on December 2nd, we have tentatively scheduled the University of Nations matter, and on December 3rd as well. December 16th and 17th is currently open. January 6th, we have Hokua Place, Kauai. And January 7th, we also have Hokua Place. On January 27th, we have the Kamalani matter on Maui. On the 28th, we have the Barry Trust Island on the Big Island. And on February 10th, we also have the Barry Trust matter scheduled for adoption of order. And that takes us through the schedules of any certainty at this point.
Thank you very much, Dan. Commissioners, are there any questions for Dan about our schedule? Questions, commissioners? Seeing none. I apologize if you're picking up some construction noise in the background. At this particular meeting location of the LUC, a house is being constructed nearby. But let me know if you're having a hard time hearing my voice. Our next agenda item is docket number A11794, State of Hawaii Department of Education, Kihei High School, Maui, for a status report and action if necessary on that docket. To consider the petitioner's State of Hawaii Department of Education's motion to amend the Land Use Commission's findings of fact, conclusions of law, and decision in order filed July 29th, 2013. Will the parties on A11794 please identify yourselves for the record? You may need to enable your audio. Mr. Fujioka.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. This is Stuart Fujioka, Deputy Attorney General for Move On Department of Education.
Okay. And do you have any of your clients with you?
Randall Tanaka is, I don't see him appearing yet, although I just spoke with him, so he should be on.
I see his indicated as having logged into this portion of the meeting.
Okay, I see him now. Thanks.
Okay. Is that it?
Yes, and there should be someone from the Department of Transportation attending. I know Ed Sniffen had a scheduling overlap, but either him and or Robin Shishido should be on. I don't see Robin or Ed, no.
Please let me know if your clients appear.
I'm sorry.
Please let me know if your clients appear.
Thank you.
Maui,
Chair, this is Scott.
Scott.
Robin Shishido is in the attendee side right now.
Okay. You can admit them in.
Okay.
Maui County.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Michael Hopper, Deputy Corporation Counsel representing the Maui County Department of Planning. With me is Planning Director Michelle McLean.
Office Planning.
Good morning, Chair and members. Deputy Attorney General Donna Kuna on behalf of the State Office of Planning. Here with me today is Rodney Funakoshi.
Thank you very much. Now let me update our record. At our meeting on September 10th, 2020, the Commission took public testimony and heard arguments on A11-794 and deferred consideration of the DOE's motion to amend. The parties were directed to engage in meetings with the community and each other to attempt to solidify their positions on the matter. New position statements were to be filed by November 5th, and the chair was authorized to sign a deferral order. On October 28th, the Commission emailed and mailed our November 4th and 5th, 2020 agenda notice of our meeting to our statewide Maui and Hawaii regular and email mailing lists. Now let me briefly run over our procedures for today. First, I will recognize written public testimony that has been submitted on this matter, identifying the person or organization who has been submitting the testimony. Next, I will call on those individuals if they wish to also add oral testimony. If so, if you're attending the meeting, use the raise your hand function on Zoom. I will bring you in, swear you in, give you 3 minutes to testify, and then you'll be available for questioning by the parties and the commissioners. Following that, I will open it up to anybody else who has logged in who wishes to testify, and who will be admitted in the same manner. After completion of public testimony, the petitioner will present their status report, followed by the County of Maui and the Office of Planning. From time to time, we will take short breaks. I try to take a break of about 10 minutes every hour. Are there any comments or questions on our procedures for today?
No, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Fujioka?
No comment.
No, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. We have in the half-hour recess that was that we ended up having this morning. Testimony was forwarded to us by Mr. Hakoda. In addition, prior to testimony being forwarded to us, one testimony had been timely received on this matter. Sorry, Mr. Hakoda, the name of that testifier is Andrew Beerer.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I see Mr. Beerer is here. Mr. Beerer, if you wish to testify, please use the raise hand function. Okay, I'm going to admit you in. If you can enable your video, if possible, Mr. Beerer. Can you, oh, there you are. Aloha. Oh, you're frozen. How's your audio? Can you say something? If you're having connectivity issues, perhaps. Excuse me. Maybe disable your video and we'll just have you by audio.
Okay.
That might improve the connectivity.
Yeah, we have coolers online in the house, might be taking up the bandwidth.
Yeah, okay, that's better. Mr. Brewer, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, state your name and address for the record and please proceed. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Andrew Burer, address 56 Kolola Place, Kihei, Hawaii 9653. My testimony today on the key action is testimony in opposition to the Department of Education's request to amend the existing order.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I'm having difficulty understanding
Yeah.
words.
Mr. Beer, I apologize. I think, and I'm somebody who also has a coworker at home, as well as a remote learner at home. So I appreciate the limited bandwidth issue. We have your written testimony. Since we're having such a hard time hearing you, if you might just do a brief as possible statement on your position. You're opposed to the motion, and what do you specifically need us to know this morning?
Although we favor a roundabout, there currently is no funding for the roundabout. So we don't want to see any concession or until there is firm funding for the roundabout.
You're in favor of the roundabout, but there's currently no firm funding for the roundabout, and you're unwilling to see any concession on the conditions until there is such firm funding. Do I understand that correctly?
I don't know if you got any of that.
Thanks for everyone's patience. This is one of those moments. What I heard you say is that you are in favor of a roundabout, but there is no firm funding for a roundabout, and you're unwilling to accept concessions on the conditions until such firm funding is available.
Correct. No need to make a rush to judgment today. We need to get that confirmed funding. Otherwise, we could end up with a worst case scenario, intersection with no safe crossing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brewer. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. If you could just go by the written testimony, that would be great.
We will. Thank you. Are there any questions for the witness? Department of Education.
I don't have any questions for him. Thank you.
Thank you. Maui.
No, Mr. Chair.
OP.
No questions.
Commissioners. Thank you for your continued steadfastness in participating in these proceedings, Mr. Brewer. Okay, our next testimony was received from Mr. Mike Moran. Mr. Moran, are you available? If so, please use the raise your hand function. Okay, if you can enable your audio and video, hopefully you have good connectivity. Saw you briefly.
Well, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, well, you don't have to see me. That's not so important.
Okay.
Once you can hear me.
Mr. Moran, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
You'll have to take my word that my hand is up, and I do swear to tell the truth.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed, Mr. Moran.
Yeah, I will try to be brief. Thank you for finding our written testimony. And as always, thank you to the volunteer commissioners for all your help for the community. Rather than repeat what was in our testimony, and a lot of it reflects what Andrew said or was trying to say this morning. So I think our position is pretty clear. I just wanted to, I'm not sure when the DOE had a meeting. I know Executive Officer was there, but I don't know whether what happened at those meetings is relayed to the commissioners. So I would just offer from our perspective as a volunteer organization, we understood what the chair said this morning, that the intent was to have communication. We waited several days and didn't receive any communication. So we try to be proactive and wrote to the DOE and asked to have some communication set up. And we did get a response, and they set a meeting, kind of not asking if we were available, but I guess that's the way it is. This is when this meeting will be, and you're welcome to participate. So all our volunteers lined up, and without trying to beat a dead horse, some guys are taking off from work, some are arranging childcare, and 18 minutes before that meeting was scheduled to begin, we got an email that said, sorry, meeting is postponed. And then a few days later, we got a new notice that a new meeting was scheduled. Well, unfortunately, we lost a lot of our volunteers. People said, look, I already spent the money, I spent the time, I can't keep doing this. So we had limited participation in that second meeting, but we did our best and did participate. And we did receive some documents the evening before the meeting that took place, a lot of detail on the timeline for the school. And then when the meeting started, we were expecting to hear from the DOE, but we were told, no, they were expecting to hear from us. So we were limited in our manpower and unprepared, but we tried. We went to their documents, and Andrew started asking questions about the timeline, and every question was deflected. We're not prepared to answer that. So at that point, we were wondering, what's the purpose of the meeting? And they said, well, the purpose of the meeting is we want you to agree to get rid of this condition. And we said, well, no, we're not. And pretty much what's reflected in Andrew's written testimony and ours was how we felt about the situation. No, there's nothing set here. And my recollection is that DOT Deputy Director Sniffen guaranteed that the roundabout was coming in. Just take my word for it, it's going to be in, but nobody had any information on funding. So that seemed like an unacceptable way to proceed, to just take somebody's word that the roundabout will be done. Now go ahead and proceed. So while there was communication, we felt it was kind of a disjointed, rather ineffective communication. So then we tried to reach out to, we did reach out to the executive director a couple of days before and said, we wanted to be clear, this is our position. We weren't sure if this item was going to be on the agenda or not, but this was our position. And that brings us up to today. So I think everything is pretty clear. What Andrew was saying, no, we're not prepared to say, yes, remove this condition when nothing is assured. We could be going back to 2013 before the condition was ever put in by the commission that they could just put a traffic light and no off-grade crossing, no roundabout, just the way it was before. So we're not prepared to accept that this morning. Thank you very much. I tried to be short, but I was pretty long-winded.
No, that was a good summary, Mr. Moran. Thank you very much. Are there questions for Mr. Moran from the Department of Education?
No questions.
Maui
No
County, Mr. Hopper.
No questions, Chair.
Office of Planning.
No questions.
Commissioners, Commissioner Okuda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Moran, for taking time to participate in today's hearing. May I ask this first question? Who were you dealing with as far as setting up this meeting and having the meeting postponed and the transmittals of documents to you? I mean, was there somebody with the state of Hawaii, an individual that was the point of contact?
There was Commissioner Okuda, but unfortunately, I don't recollect the name. My best recollection, it was a Wahine, which I guess reduces it to half the population, but I'm pretty challenged. For me to try and zip back to that email, I would probably get cut off here, but I don't recall her name, but I'm sure someone at DOE could tell us who was doing the communication on the emails and setting up the first meeting, canceling that, and then setting up the second meeting. Then once the meeting transpired, Randall was the individual who was conducting the meeting, but he was not the one who sent out the notices. And there was no mention of why the meeting was canceled. I guess that's not an obligation, but kind of in Hawaii, we kind of expected somebody would have said, gee, we're sorry we had to cancel that meeting, but we had an emergency. But it wasn't stated, and we didn't ask for a reason for it. So that's the best explanation I can give at this time, Commissioner.
Yeah, Mr. Moran, and my question is not intended to put down or denigrate the staff personnel at any agency or any department, or frankly, any private company. I'm just trying to find out whether somebody in authority, to use that word generally, was the point of contact, or whether or not this was just a person who appeared to be just a low-level staff person just making the arrangements. And I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but I'm just trying to find out what level of contact was being outreached by the department. Was it your impression it was just a regular lower-level staff person that was making these arrangements?
Yes, sir. That was my interpretation, that it was somebody that was just told, okay, son, here's the plan. The authority figures made the plan for a meeting and then said, okay, send this out to all the appropriate people. And somebody did. And then likewise, that somebody in authority said, well, hey, we're not having a meeting today. Just send out another notice now. And, they were coming on email. So some of our group didn't even get it. So I'm quickly trying to send an email. Did everybody get word this meeting is canceled?
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Moran, I don't mean to cut you off, but I understand that. I'm just trying to find out what level of participation or authority was involved in setting up this meeting. Can I ask you a broader question?
Certainly.
And this is kind of similar to the question that I asked at a contentious Mauna Kea hearing, which had come before the commission before the pandemic. Trying to look for solutions here. Would it be fair to say that one of the problems that we're facing on this issue, and let me be blunt because my wife always accuses me of not having any tact, but there is just no trust with the Department of Education. I mean, speaking very frankly and bluntly, that the community does not trust the Department of Education. Whether or not that belief is right or wrong or what have you, that's a fundamental problem we're having here.
Yes, sir. I would agree to that. And again, and just like you, I'm not casting aspersion at individuals because there's been so many different individuals at the DOE. You're dealing with somebody for a couple of years, then all at once you don't get any response and you do some homework and you say, oh, that guy retired 6 months ago. Well, geez, yeah. Could somebody tell us? So no, but for the department, to say the department as a whole, yes, very little faith in it because of so many missteps and so many lacks of communication. So as an entity, as a department, yes, sir, very, very little faith with the community.
Okay, and you probably don't know my background. I don't expect you to do, but I do trial work, and I believe litigation is an example of failures of the human spirit and human beings where we fight things out in court. So let me ask this question so we try to avoid or minimize the normal failures of human behavior. If I were the tooth fairy and asked you to tell me one thing, just name one thing the Department of Education could do as maybe just a small step of building a bridge of trust with the community, what would be that one thing? And I don't mean to sound facetious or stupid here, but if you tell me, hey, the thing to show trust is to dress up in the Easter Bunny suit along the highway and wave at the cars, I'll take that. It's because building bridges require or relationships require little bricks here and there. So what would be the one thing, maybe a very small step, but the one thing which, if the Department of Education did, the one concrete thing in your mind would demonstrate that there is a real effort being done to demonstrate trust and relationship with the Kihei community?
Okay, Commissioner, what I thought I heard at the last meeting was a request for the department to communicate with the community. And I don't feel that I'm the community. I am one single voice that represents a group that's trying to represent the community. So to me, I thought one positive step, and maybe, I don't know if this is a small step for the DOE or not, but to me it would be, is to arrange a meeting such as this, a Zoom meeting with the community. Say anybody that lives in South Maui, we would like to present to you our position. They had a public meeting. Of course, that was in the days of before the virus, when you could have them in person, perhaps 3 years ago. And we thought that was an excellent way. They had several representatives came to Kihei, arranged a public meeting, and we thought that was a very positive thing to do. But then years go by and there's no more communication. And we keep getting the questions from the community. Well, how come the construction has stopped for 6 months? What's going on? Well, we don't know and we can't get an answer. So we tell them we're trying to find out. Maybe if enough voices, if enough individuals ask the department, maybe go to your elected officials, but we can't get the answer as much as we're trying as volunteers. So we think that might be one positive step that, in our estimation, would be a reasonable thing to say. Allow time and probably pick a reasonable time. So some folks are working, maybe on a weekend, maybe in an evening or a late time in the day, to say we're going to have a public meeting for 1 hour or whatever time limit they want to be. Anybody can participate, and we'll give a presentation and we'll answer questions from the community as a way to truly communicate with the community.
Okay.
So that's one
Mr.
suggestion.
Yeah. Okay. So, Mr. Moran, if I can just summarize, and this is my last question, actually, in 2 parts. One of the steps which you believe would be a demonstration of the willingness of the Department of Education to truly communicate and work with the community would be to have something like a community Zoom meeting at a convenient time. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, and secondly, would it help in resolving or minimizing these communication issues if somebody with authority, and it doesn't have to be at the assistant superintendent level, because we understand at that level people are very busy, but somebody with authority to be the designated point person to not only receive communications from the community, but actually respond. And when I say respond, I mean a substantive response, not a pass the buck response. Would that be helpful? So
That would be most helpful, Commissioner, because yes, we've all seen those things where, well, I can't answer that. I'll have to check with my boss and get back to you. Well, that defeats the purpose of bringing the community together. So yes,
Yeah.
sir, that second part would be extremely helpful.
So in other words, a name of a person, disclosure of the title of the person, so that there's at least a feeling of confidence that that person is not just some throwaway low-level person put out as a sacrificial lamb, and a telephone number and email to contact that person. That would be something that would be helpful in your view.
Yes, sir, I completely agree with that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moran. Thank you, Mr. Chair. No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Our commissioners, are there further questions for Mr. Moran?
Chair.
Commissioner Wong.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Moran, I just have a question. As you know, right now, we have the state, I'm going to say the state in general, has some fiscal issues. And at this point in time, I can't see them building a overpass or underpass, but could maybe do a roundabout. Could we put some sort of conditions maybe or a change of condition to say, let's do a roundabout now, and in phase 2, when there's more funding, you must do an overpass or underpass?
Well, the challenge, Commissioner, goes back to what your fellow commissioner asked. Is there trust in the community? We go back to this, when this condition was put in 2013, when all these challenges weren't, by delaying and making comments that they didn't understand that this was a condition, that to say, okay, we believe you now, DOE, we'll give up on this because you're giving us your word that you will do this at some future time. The community is unfortunately not going to accept that because they have been misled so many times. And to say that, okay, we'll do this now, even though we have no assurance that they can do it now, they could do the roundabout. That's the question now. How do we know they couldn't do the roundabout if there's no funding? And as you mentioned, this is very challenging times. Had the DOE proceeded in some sort of a proactive way, all this would have been achieved beforehand. So to ask that of us now, when there's no assurance that anybody is, Mr. Sniffin's word that he will get this done somehow, doesn't instill a lot of confidence in anyone. So to ask that, that's part of our testimony, to say, then that could be dropped. They could say, well, we can't do the roundabout. So now you gave us the okay to forget the condition. So we're left with nothing. So that's the challenge we have with trying to do something along those lines, Commissioner Wong.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I mean, they jerked around the Land Use Commission too by promising certain stuff. So I understand your point, but what I'm saying is, let's put in 2 conditions or 2 parts the condition. Roundabout now, plus the overpass or underpass in like 5 to 7 years.
Well, there's, I know this is such a complex, but I will just relay what one of my community members said when we were trying to discuss this matter. And he said, well, what I'm understanding is the roundabout is safer for pedestrians and bicyclists than a signalized intersection. But a off-grade crossing is the safest. So are we willing to put our children's life and limb on, well, we're going to do it a little better, so fewer kids will get killed and there'll be fewer accidents? Or do we want to say, no, that's why we have this condition in here. We want what's the safest. Is it money or is it life and limb, not only of the school children, but the staff and the whole community, which was brought up at a prior UC meeting, that once the school is open, there'll be community events going there. So to say, well, we'll just delay this 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the line, and oh, okay, now if it's an accident and a child gets killed, maybe we'll step it up now. That seems like a disingenuous way to proceed after all this time.
And I totally agree with you because, as you know, in our when we had a meeting in Maui, I think all of the commissioners just said no life should be given for this one thing. I mean, every life matters. It doesn't matter even if it's, a dog or a cat, every life matters. So we all agree on the commission side that no life should be given for, for anything. So, we are on the same page. We just try to find something to work out that we can start the process now so they don't say, oh, we cannot do it now and we're not going to do it later. So we want to get at least something from them. That now, at least, that's what we're trying to, I'm trying to see. That's what.
And I understand that, Commissioner, but I don't think we have to make that decision today.
Okay.
We're willing to proceed.
If I may, as the chair, I think this colloquy is very, very important, but I don't think that we're going to resolve. Commissioner Wong's expressed his tendency towards a thing, and Mr. Moran has expressed that it's not possible to come to that conclusion today. Is there anything further, Commissioner Wong, at this point?
I just want to say thank you, Mr. Moran. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Chang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Ms. Moran. Thank
Good
you
morning,
again for taking the time to join us at this hearing. Have you read the Department of Education's motion and their proposed revisions to the condition?
I would have to be honestly say I personally have not. As a figurehead president of an association, this is not any reflection on your chair, believe me, but as a figurehead commissioner, as a figurehead leader, I'm only in this position because nobody else wants to do it. But I rely on people who are much smarter and are really laser focused on one issue. So unfortunately, we have such poor communication with our Andrew Bira. He has read all these documents, believe me. So he's the one that I refer to. So I can honestly say I know he has read everything. I have no doubt in my mind, and if he were be able to communicate, he would tell you that. But honestly, no, myself, I have not, Commissioner.
And Mr. Moran, you are much too humble, as you are much more Akamai than you give yourself credit for. I probably should have asked Mr. Is it Bureau? Bureau this question. I just wanted to confirm that the position of at least your organization and those that you've been speaking with is that you oppose the Department of Education's request to delete the condition in the LUC approval that requires the above or below ground pedestrian crossing. That is a position. You don't want that deleted.
Not today.
Yeah,
Certainly not today.
Okay.
It could be in the future. We'll see what brings. But our feeling is that's what we're deciding is what is the commission going to decide today, and we're not ready to ask you to do that today.
But you do support the roundabout if funding is provided.
Completely, totally. We fought for this for many, many years. This came from our community when the DOT was opposed to it. And fortunately, we kind of feel that they changed their position. We didn't change ours. So yes, we're totally in support of the roundabout.
Okay. And what I also heard you say in your discussions with Commissioner Wong is that no decision needs to be made today regarding whether we require roundabout, I mean, whether the roundabout gets built in 5 or 7 years. But would you agree that doing a reassessment within the next couple of years about the effectiveness of the signalized crosswalk as well as the roundabout is reasonable as a way to keep, to assess whether you may need to go in phase 2 to building the underpass or the overpass, but you're comfortable with coming back and doing a assessment or reevaluation of any additional mitigation measures to ensure safety. Are you comfortable with that?
Well, to be clear, Commissioner, it's our understanding that there seems to be total agreement that the roundabout is going to be, there will not be a signalized intersection. And we did get the feeling at this meeting with the DOE and with the DOE chiming in that it was kind of being put to us. Well, we're giving you the roundabout, so you have to give us give up on the condition. And our response to that was no. You're not giving us anything. You're doing what the engineers said is the best, safest way for this intersection is to put in the roundabout. So we're accepting that as a settled decision. Now, whether once the roundabout is put in, whether delaying the school for the underpass or overpass in addition to the roundabout, well, then we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it. We sure hope not, because again, we want safest, not safer. But we're all aware of financial considerations. Who knows where this pandemic will be in 1 year, in 2 years. But our understanding is the roundabout is settled. That's not going to be going back. Well, if you don't help us by giving up on the condition for the off grade, then we're taking away the roundabout. I think we'd have a riot in our community if that was proposed, that we're now bargaining with children's lives.
Thank you, Mr. Moran.
Just trying to be clear, Commissioner.
Okay,
Thank you.
And in all due respect to DOE, it's not going to be their decision. That will be the LUC's decision. So I appreciate your testimony. Thank you so much. I have no other questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Chang. Commissioner Axon.
Okay, Mr. Chair. Mr. Moran, I just want to confirm things. The last meeting we had, it was overwhelmingly the community saying all or nothing. We want the runabout, and we also want the underpass or overpass. Is the position changed that runabout is okay if it is funded and done?
Well, no, you're correct, sir. That has been our position all along, that we feel that the condition for the off-grade crossing was put in years ago by the commission, and we applauded that. We thought it was the right thing to do. Once the DOE said they were putting the high school a Mauka of the highway, when whatever it is, 95% of the population is Makai, we felt that was good. We kept asking for the roundabout, but we understood that at that time, the DOT was saying, absolutely not, we're not going to do it. Once the DOT came to that position.
Mr. Moran, my question is, the last hearing, community was saying all or nothing. We want roundabout, and we also want the underpass and or overpass. Now you are saying, or the community is saying, is give us the runabout, and we'll talk about the thing later. Is that what?
We're still saying we want both. We feel there is a need for
Thank
both.
You. I got the answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any further questions for Mr. Moran? Commissioner Giovanni.
Mr. Moran, thank you again for your service too as a volunteer representing your community. So we heard from the Department of Transportation at the last hearing on this matter that the existing underground route was unsafe, despite the fact that there is a beaten path today where people are taking that path. So if the roundabout is built, we asked the Department of Transportation, would they temporarily block off with like a chain link fence access to the underground pathway in its undeveloped state? And they said they couldn't do that either because it would, in the event of a flash flood, it would accumulate debris and cause a real problem. So from a safety perspective, what do you see as the fate or what is acceptable in the interim for the underground pathway should the roundabout be built, but the underground pathway not be addressed as yet?
Well, I think a few things to consider, Commissioner, is that maybe I'm stereotyping, but I was one of those long time ago. I was one of those high school kids. And I think if they did try and block off access, they'd have to build a Trump-style wall along the border. And I give you an example that for years, just north of where this school site is, the Kihei Charter School had their school located in that industrial park. And directly in line with where that school was, there was a concrete, like a big circular concrete drainage pipe, that was a drainage pipe. It was dry. I happened to live in the area and it was perpetually dry. Not only did the school kids use this as their own underpass, so did many of the adult community members, because they didn't want to walk blocks in either direction to find a signalized intersection. So they used that as their own way. I assume it was the DOT came up and built a chain link fence. As I said, I used to walk my dog by that every day, so I saw the fence go up. The next day I went by it, the kids had already cut a big hole in the fence and were reusing it. So it would be pretty challenging to get the children, to get the community to not continue using it. And unfortunately, if it's in that condition, they're walking along the bottom. If there were any flooding, they'd be walking in a worse place. And one other consideration is that presently, when the construction is active, the construction team they're walking through this gulch, they're running their equipment through this gulch, they're going north and south, not east and west, but they're going right through this gulch. So they don't seem to feel that there's any danger. And if there was a flood, well, they would just not be there. They would clear out. So it seems like to say this is a tremendous hazard. Well, the people that are on the ground right now have been using that for months. So, and I understand that Director Sniffen said, well, he only has this one study. Somebody give him another study. Well, we're not really equipped to do that. We did pay a few $1,000s to get a roundabout study, but that's a lot of $25 memberships to go in to say, okay, now get us a counter study that says this passageway could be used. We've offered many examples of river walks all over the country, all over the world, and saying, why can't you do something like this? But to put that on us and say, well, get me an alternative study, and then I'll consider that, I think is really pressing for the community. So that's the best way I could explain that situation, Commissioner.
Okay, and the next question, Mr. Moran, is that Mr. Sniffen testified that based on perhaps that same study you're referring to, that if the roundabout is built, that more than 90% of the pedestrians would choose to use it as opposed to any of the underground path. Do you concur or do you challenge that statement of interpretation by Mr. Sniffen?
Well, again, I don't have any professional study and I don't have any professional standing, but just as a community member, I would certainly challenge that. I think a lot, not only the children, but others, do they want to wait and have to, assuming they're coming from those neighborhoods that run right by that gulch. The county has been in the plans to build a road that crosses right over that gulch that is just a malka of the highway. So we're picturing that in the future, that these kids are walking along this, not only a road, but with an adjoining greenway. So that's where the kids are coming from, the adjoining neighborhoods, and they're going to reach that gulch. Well, the ones coming from the south are going to reach it before they would reach the grade crossing. And to say, well, those kids are going to bypass that gulch and go up the hill and then cross at this road, I kind of doubt it. I don't think so. And if I were walking there or I were riding my bike there, that's what I would do. I would take the path of least resistance. And again, I don't have studies, but I think the greater population is to the south rather than the north. And so I think that's where more of the kids are coming from. And our understanding is that the DOE will only provide bus transportation to students that are a mile and a half or more away from the school. Well, that's not going to be too many of the neighborhood kids. They're all going to be within that mile and a half. They're not going to have the school bus. So it's either going to be mom and dad are saying to the kids, it's good for you, walk to school, it's safe now, or we're going to have to take you. And, more traffic, all the things that we're trying to go against. So I have to disagree with Mr. Sniffen. I acknowledging his standing as an engineer and his studies, but as someone in the community, I have to disagree with his estimation.
Okay, thank you. Chair, no further questions from me.
Thank you, Commissioner Giovanni. Commissioners, are there any further questions for Mr. Moran at this time? If not, Mr. Moran, you have my sincere thanks for your being available and for your testimony on this matter.
And back at your whole team, sir. Thank you very much. Aloha.
Okay, I'm going to move you to become an attendee again. I'm going to admit Representative Tina Wildberger, who has submitted written testimony and who has her hand raised to speak. Good morning, Representative Wildberger.
Good morning.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
I do.
Okay, please proceed.
Thank you, Director, Chair, and Commissioners. Appreciate your time this morning revisiting this important issue. I am testifying today again in my support of Kihei Community Association's work and position on this issue, and ask you to defer this amendment to the request for the mandate for safe pedestrian crossing at the Kihei High School location. Mahalo.
Thank you, Representative. Are there any questions for Representative Wildberger? Mr. Fujioka.
No questions, thank you.
Maui County, Mr. Hopper.
No, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Takeuchi Apuna.
No questions.
Okay, Commissioner Okuda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Wildberger. May I ask you the same general question that I asked Mr. Moran? Can you think of one thing the Department of Education might do or should do or could do to start demonstrating good faith to the community?
Yes, I'm hopeful that Randall Tanaka is going to be a faithful actor in these endeavors. I want to acknowledge that he has reached out to me several times since our last meeting I was disappointed in not being offered an opportunity to attend the rescheduled meeting after the abrupt cancellation of the first community meeting that you all mandated DOE to conduct. I was unable to attend when most other people were, and his administrator had originally offered that they could reschedule and then decided, since I was the only one who couldn't attend, that they would proceed without me. But he has reached out. He did provide us the documentation before that meeting. And it is my hope that he will help the other people that are charged with these different portions of the project will be more communicative, transparent, and cooperative with the community on what's going on. Sadly, DOE is not the only clandestine department that we have. It seems to be the manner in which all of our departments operate, that if they just stonewall, ignore, pretend that no one's asking questions, and simply refuse to offer information, then maybe we'll go away. But that's not the case here. So onward we work for cooperative engagement, and we appreciate the LUC's particular support in this area very much. Mahalo.
And what do you think about Mr. Moran's suggestion of like a community Zoom meeting, you know, for the purposes or to cover the items that Mr. Moran had suggested? Would that be something that might be helpful?
I think that we should have quarterly meetings that with regular updates from each facet of the different areas. What I'm starting to understand is there's one guy that's in charge of the architecture part, and there's another guy in charge of this part, and I'm uncertain to who all of the players are. I'm trying to learn who they are. It's these attempts at developing relationships for communication purposes are made challenging because of the regular turnover at the DOE, which doesn't, you know, reflect too positively on them. But we have new people in both of the positions. The people that we were interacting with in the spring are now completely different individuals. So my office continues to reach out on behalf of the community to ask for engagement. And that seems to have helped a little. And a quarterly meeting would go a long way to help us understand what's going on with the parcel. We saw first signs of life after over 6 months of no activity. They did finally start putting up the construction fencing just Monday.
So maybe something that would be helpful is that a regularly scheduled meeting, like a certain day of every 3 months. And if there's something to discuss, then it's discussed then. If there's nothing to discuss, there actually might be a benefit of everybody just seeing each other's face by Zoom, even after this pandemic is finished, just to say, okay, we're all here. Is there any problems or any issues? Nothing else? Okay, everybody be safe. Mahalo and aloha. Something like that. You would think a regular.
It's a very good idea.
Well, I think it's your idea. A regularly scheduled quarterly meeting, and that would be something that would be helpful. Yeah, actually, the Land Use Commission prior to the pandemic mandated something like that with respect to the Waimanalo Gulch landfill, that the city and county was to report to the community every quarter about what they were doing with the landfill. So what you're suggesting is not something unusual or something that, you know, no one else had thought of before. Okay, thank you very much, Representative. Appreciate your testimony and your input. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank
Nothing
you,
further.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Okuda. Commissioners, are there further questions for Representative Wildberger? Commissioners? Commissioner Cabral.
Thank you for appearing and working to represent your community. I was going to somewhat ask this question of Mr. Moran, but you brought up some of the same feeling I've had from our hearings over there. Am I getting the feeling that it's either, do you have a feeling that there's an intentional effort on the part of DOE to just completely not care what the public feels because it takes too much work to be do you think it's a planned intention to do this? Or is it just general government ineptness due to no worry that you'll ever lose your job if you don't do a good job? Or, I mean, I'm concerned that this community has this huge problem, and I'm in the public, I'm in private business, so I'd be out of work if I had this attitude. I'd be out of business. So I'm concerned that nobody seems to care. What is your take on that, or can you even comment?
So, but benign neglect, maybe. Intentional stonewalling, also maybe. Is this the status quo and how these departments have operated over decades? Possibly. I'm new to this game, just 2 years under my belt, so I still find myself blinking frequently with raised eyebrows at a lot of things that I witness. So yeah, I'm here to help change the culture and the status quo and develop transparency and accountability by our government for our communities.
Thank you. I'm gravely concerned because truly, I don't want to think that at any point that there'd be a death on that highway because of the fact that everybody just passes the buck to somebody else and nobody's ultimately responsible. So it's a huge concern to me.
And frankly, I think that as far as community culture is concerned, that, and particularly on Oahu, where all of these decisions are being made on behalf of our Maui County community, there is an anti-pedestrian and anti-bicycle culture. You are in somebody's way if you're walking or biking. Boy, no surprise you got killed on that road. What were you doing trying to cross that street in a crosswalk? So I feel like this is this issue is even bigger than just the DOE, the DOT, and the high school issue. This is about changing a anti-pedestrian, anti-non-motorized vehicle culture that exists obviously in the Department of Transportation and all the way down to all of our other departments that I would like to try to change.
I totally appreciate that. I'm from the Big Island and from Hilo, and I'd have horse riding paths if I had my way. But
right.
Thank you very much for your efforts. Thank you.
Are there further questions, commissioners, for Representative Wildberger? Thank you very much, Representative, for your time.
Thank you all for your time and your efforts. We appreciate you. Aloha.
Aloha. Commissioners, we are at a full hour in, but we do have one individual who's provided written testimony who has also raised their hand, who's been very patient. If it's possible to continue with them before taking a break. Okay, so I'm changing the role of Representative Wildberger to be an attendee, and I am admitting Ms. Stillwell. Or yeah, Ms. Stillwell. If you're able to enable your audio and video now that you've been admitted.
Okay, here I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Aloha.
Aloha.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give us the truth?
Absolutely.
And sorry, if I may, before you start your testimony, I don't know why this only occurred to me after the 10th meeting, but are you connected then with Stillwell's?
No.
Oh, okay.
Fortunately not.
Okay. Okay. Please proceed.
Patricia Stillwell, 227 Kamakoi Loop, Kihei, Hawaii. I did submit written testimony, but you can read that. But since the conversation has moved on to more specific things, I would like to state for the record that I am against removing this amendment. I did read the motion by the DOE when it first came out, which was probably a couple of months ago. So it's not fresh in my mind, but I remember at the time my takeaway was they were proposing a, you get your roundabout if you take out the amendment for the under overpass or the condition for the under overpass. And in my mind, it should not be an either or situation. Roundabouts have been determined by many federal safety studies to be the safest choice for busy intersections, and they're becoming the standard for highway safety. In my opinion, it should have been the go-to design from the beginning. And also the roundabout is, as you know, is serving the north end of the high school, which will be the main entrance. The south end of the high school could be served by the gulch that we've been talking about. And you know, kids, if they're late for school or even on an ordinary day, if they have an easier exit, their classes at their south end of the school, they're not going to walk another quarter of a mile to get to that intersection where the roundabout is. They're going to dart across 4 lanes of highway. That's what kids do. It's not unusual. It will also serve the students going to the Kihei Charter School and the growing community in the R&T Park. And I don't think this condition should be removed without further discussion between the DOE, the DOT, and the community, how to resolve this important safety requirement and open the school as soon as possible. And you've asked what the DOE needs to do, and I think it's exactly that. Leave the amendment in, then come to the community. It's not up to us. How many are we? 4 individuals testifying today? I don't know, but it's not our decision. It's the community's decision as to how we proceed. But if we take the condition out, then we've got nothing. The roundabout to me is a non-issue at this point. It is to be built. They need to get funding. It is a federal safety standard that roundabouts are the primary intersection controller. So we need to hear from the community as to how best to proceed if there is going to be a concession made or what that concession will be. So I think the meetings with the DOE, like we've been talking about, quarterly meeting, has to happen in order to know how to proceed with the next step. Thank you. And I really appreciate all your time and patience. You guys are rock stars.
Thank you very much, Ms. Stillwell. Are there questions for the witness? Mr. Fujioka?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Hawk?
No questions. No questions, Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Takeuchi Apuna?
No questions.
Commissioners? No. Thank you for your written and your oral testimony and your patience. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move you to be an attendee again. Is there anyone in the audience who has also desired to provide testimony? We're going to take a 10-minute break, but I want to get a sense of whether or not there's anybody in addition. We did receive one other piece of written emailed testimony from Libby Fulton, but I have not seen them appearing in the attendee box. Is there anybody else who wishes to provide public testimony on this matter? If so, raise your hand. If not, then seeing none, it is 10:39 a.m. We will reconvene at 10:50 a.m. in 11 minutes with the presentation from the Department of Education. We're in recess. I will share as we're waiting that one benefit of remote learning in my household is that during the LUC breaks, I get to go have recess with my son. So we goof around a little bit, get the blood pumping. It's fun. Okay, it is 10:50. Commissioners, let's go. And parties. Commissioner Axon.
How many deputy attorney generals do we have here?
You can never have too many, apparently.
This is the first meeting, so Bill's kind of helping to supervise me, and Melissa is also new, and she's observing right now.
Commissioner Giovanni. Oh, has he logged out of the meeting? Mr. Hakoda or Wardenker or Derrickson?
We are attempting to call him right now, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wong, Commissioner Wong.
Chair.
Ms.
Chair.
McManus.
Thank you. Was that Lauren Chun who just spoke?
Yes, it was.
Thank you.
Introducing herself after Commissioner Ohigashi inquired as to why we have 3 deputies attorney general available to us.
Sure, I believe it's to write her on Commissioner Ohigashi.
Perhaps we need as many deputies attorney general as we do attorneys on the commission, so they can play one-on-one defense. In which case, I think we're still short one, aren't we?
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome, Commissioner Giovanni. Can you hear us?
Hear you fine. I apologize for being.
No problem. Okay. For the record, you were beaten by Commissioner Cabral. So.
Touche. Way to go, Nancy.
Okay. We're now back on the record as 10:52 a.m. and we will hear from Mr. Fujioka and the Department of Education on the status update. Assuming Mr. Fujioka is with us.
Thank you. Is Mr. Tanaka on?
He was earlier, I thought. Is he? Yeah, I don't know where your client is. Please proceed.
On behalf of the DOE, we submitted a written update with some of the exhibits that were discussed by the witnesses last time we were together. The position of the DOE is still that a roundabout is the best and safest measure to put in at the outset. The concern we have is the current order requires that GSPC be put in place before the school is opened. And in order to accomplish that, the legislature needs to be convinced that there is justification and funding for it. So that we don't know if we can do, because the recommendations we have from the independent studies that were contracted and the Department of Transportation do not recommend or advise a GSPC at this point. So what we would suggest is allow the DOE to build a roundabout, open the school, and then the condition preceding the GSPC requirement sets out specific times at which the traffic area impact study needs to be updated. I think one is right after, a year after the school is opened, and another is before phase 2 is open. But we've also proposed doing another one before phase 2 begins construction. And there's another one in the Commission's order that if more than 3 years goes by and phase 2 is not being built, another study should be done anyway. So I think there are enough safeguards to continue reassessing the need for not only a GSPC, but any other measure in supplementation of the roundabout. So we think that our proposal is workable, and we would request that the commission grant the motion at this time.
Is that the conclusion of your oral?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioners, starting with Commissioner Chang, followed by Commissioner Okuda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Fujioka. I just want to confirm, one, is the responsibility to fund the roundabout Department of Education or Department of Transportation?
I believe it's a DOE responsibility.
Okay, and is the roundabout included? Well, let me ask it this way. Does the DOE currently have funds to build the roundabout?
I would need to have Mr. Tanaka speak to that, and I don't see him on the list of participants. I tried to call him, but I couldn't get through.
Okay, because Mr. Fujioka, for me as a commissioner, that's really important to know and to get a confirmation from DOE that you have funds for this roundabout when you're asking for that in the motion.
I understand. So if we could, when Mr. Tanaka becomes available, I'd like to confirm that with him. Thank you.
Okay. And I just wanted to confirm what I heard you say as the next steps. This is what I thought I heard you say. One, build the roundabout. Two, open the school. And three, reevaluate the GSPC prior to phase 2 begins construction. Is that correct?
The commission's current order also requires a supplementation of that TAIS 1 year after the school is open.
Okay, so that would be open the school. 3, update the TIAR.
I think it's called a TAIS, the traffic area impact study.
TAIS. Update TIS after 1 year. Is that what?
Yes.
Okay.
And then there would be another update, I guess, either before phase 2 begins construction, or if it's taking more than 3 years, whichever comes first.
So it'd be reevaluate GSPC prior to phase 2 beginning construction, or 3 years after opening of phase 1, whichever occurs sooner.
I believe so. And then there's another one, I think before phase 2 opens.
Bring it up now.
Is it the
She's the only one who doesn't call me.
Mr. Ordenker, you're not on mute.
Oh, sorry.
So so whatever the additional condition prior to number 2, you're not proposing to amend any other changes. You're not proposing to amend any changes in the LUC condition that would affect that additional requirement prior to opening phase 2.
In terms of the GSPC?
Well, you said you think there's something else that's required before opening of phase 2.
Oh no, another update.
Okay. So you're not proposing to change that?
No, we want to leave that in place, and it doesn't. I don't think this condition is limited to GSPCs. If there's something else that's indicated by the updates, that's something.
Chair, can I ask that they not use acronyms, or at least explain what they are?
Okay, that's fair.
Please noted.
Yeah, no, Mr. Giovanni, I had the hardest time remembering a GPS. So that I understand it's either, it is the
grade separated pedestrian crossing. It includes underpass and overpass.
Right, but it could be other mitigation measures as you as you indicated, right, Mr. Fujioka?
Yeah, whatever is indicated by the updated studies.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I just want to interrupt real fast. Point of order.
Go ahead, Commissioner Wong.
I just wanted to reaffirm that on the agenda, this is only a status report right now, and we cannot do motions.
Well, so Commissioner Wong, it is actually listed on the agenda for status report and action if necessary. It is my personal inclination to not see us take any action on this matter today, but merely take a status report. Given, among other things, our understanding of the incomplete responsiveness to the Land Use Commission's earlier request for the parties to have meaningful discussions. That is my inclination. That said, it is agendized sufficiently to take an action today, though it is my strong preference not to do so. Does that address your point of order, Commissioner Wong?
Yeah, I thought it was, yeah, I'm happy that you won't hear any motions today. It's just that I'm very concerned about that right now because I wasn't prepared to do anything as of today, just hear about.
As far as it is now, I believe Commissioner Chang's questions go to the nature of the status report and what conditions the Department of Education is willing to.
Thank you, Commissioner Chang, for letting me interrupt.
Thank you, Commissioner Wong. Please proceed, Commissioner Chang. Commissioner Chang will be followed by Commissioners Okuda and Ohigashi.
Okay, no, appreciate that clarification, Commissioner Wong. I've got no further questions for Mr. Fujioka, but I will hope that you can provide me Mr. Tanaka's confirmation about the DOE funding of the roundabout.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, was that it, Commissioner Chang? Okay, Commissioner Okuda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Fujioka, for being present. I know we know each other for almost 30 years from private practice, and good to see you in service to the community. Can I ask you this? Let me just state so that there's no hidden cards here on my side. I agree with the inclination of the chair that this is a status report, and even if anyone wanted to move forward, I think the record is insufficient, especially with the absence of certain information that prior commissioner Commissioner Chang was asking. But in any event, if I can ask you these questions in line with the matter being a status report. As far as using the term opening of the school, to open the school, what government approvals are necessary at this point? Would it be simply a certificate of occupancy from the County of Maui? Is that really the major approval?
You know, I honestly don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. But if it is a certificate of occupancy, that's not something that is within the jurisdiction of the Land Use Commission, correct?
I don't believe it is, no.
Yeah, okay. Commissioner Chang already asked the question about funding of the roundabout. But can I ask you this? Was funding for the grade separated crossing ever included in the budget submitted by the Department of Education regarding the Kihei High School? Was it ever in the budget?
I think there was some funding for a study, but I don't believe there was ever funding for the actual GSPC. And I think the reason is DOE couldn't go to the legislature with just saying that it's a requirement when they didn't have DOT recommendation for it, and the studies that were contracted did not recommend it. So they were not in a position to get funding for it.
Okay, well, Mr. Fujioka, and I understand you weren't the deputy at the time, but just like, you know, a number of us commissioners, we weren't on the commission like 15, 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago. But we as commissioners, we cannot simply disavow what prior commissioners have done. If we take a position, you know, we got to take ownership of what and responsibility for what the Land Use Commission has taken place before. So can I ask for your comment on this? At least for me, and I suspect maybe a few or many of my fellow commissioners, there may be a feeling that the Department of Education, for whatever reason, just simply has ignored this Land Use Commission requirement or condition about the grade separated crossing. In other words, whatever the DOE's reasons for doing so, you know, the last time, or you know, several years ago, when we had the question raised to us in a motion or pleading filed by the County of Maui about what did we mean? Did we really mean to have this condition stated? And the answer was yes. You know, at least for me, I start getting the feeling that the Department of Education, for whatever reason, just ignores us. And it's almost like to the level of frustration about what do we have to do so that people understand that until admissible evidence is submitted, what is ordered by the commission is what is ordered to the commission. And you know, we don't want to be bad people or be too aggressive, but it's almost like the Department of Education is inviting, I don't want to call it sanctions, but you know, a real response by the Land Use Commission, because it sometimes seems like we're being ignored. Do you care to comment on maybe my own personal feeling that I feel like we're being ignored?
I've been in this position for a little over 2 years. So I can say on my watch, no, we are not ignoring the Land Use Commission. However, previously, in defense of the DOE, I think there was some kind of disconnect because the order, I know what shall means, and it says shall. I forget if it said make available or provide, or, but it called for grade separated crossing. But it also required a study, and I think Department of Transportation, I don't know if it was concurrence or recommendation or approval, but granted, it took a long time to get that study done. I think there was some deficiencies. DOT said to correct it. And then when that was finally said and done, geez, I think it was like 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, maybe more. The recommendation was against the grade separated pedestrian crossing, be it underpass or overpass. So should this have been communicated to the commission and possibly, you know, some sort of amendment be sought earlier? Yes, I would think so. But
well, if I can ask you, and this is really my final question, you know, drawing on your decades of private practice experience and drawing on your decades of what I viewed your practice to be, which was also trying to resolve disputes short of litigation. Do you think that the suggestion of scheduled quarterly meetings so that there's transparency and communication with the community is something that would be helpful? In other words, even if there's nothing to report, just the fact that you have this meeting set by Zoom or whatever technology to make it easier, that the fact that there is this regularly scheduled quarterly communication with the community, it might be helpful, and at minimum, it's not going to be detrimental. Do you think that's something we could look at?
You know, I honestly don't know if this is typical of how the DOE communicates with interacts with the community in which it's building a school, but given the circumstances in the history of what has happened, and the feeling I get from the people who at least testify, I do not think that's a bad idea.
Okay, and your what you call your feeling, which I consider almost like an expert opinion, that would also be based on your decades in private practice, just trying to do things outside of government. Would that be a fair statement?
In terms of problem solving and bringing people together, yeah, I would think that's a fair statement.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, my final question, Mr. Fujioka, is basically this. Is there any real detriment or negativity or bad things that would happen to the Department of Education if we just defer this matter, even assuming that anyone wanted to try to get decision making today, but we just defer this matter for not forever, but for a reasonable period of time. People can discuss with our executive officer what's a reasonable period of time, just to see whether we can get, or the Department of Education can get the communication and the transparency and discussion going with the community. I mean, is there some deadline which the department has to meet right away, which would be detrimental if there was a reasonable deferral, or if we just scheduled another status conference down the road? I mean, can you think of anything right now that, like a lapse of federal CARES funding or anything like that, where, we gotta really do something right now? Or do we have some time to try to build a little bit more communication with the community?
I mean, if it was going to go our way, of course, we want a decision today, but, I do not think a bit of a delay would be fatal, no.
Okay, Stuart, thank you very, very much. And thank you for being willing to leave your private practice to help the state out. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got no further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Okuda. Commissioner Ohigashi.
I noticed that Mr. Tanaka is joined the meeting. Would you want to see if he can answer Commissioner King's questions?
If he could be unmuted.
That he is in charge of his own unmuting.
Randy, can you hear me? Can you unmute yourself?
Hello, this is Randy.
Randy, were you here earlier when Commissioner Chang?
Excuse me, Mr. Fujioka. I need to swear him in. Mr. Tanaka, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please proceed, Mr. Fujioka.
Were you here when Commissioner Chang was asking about the funding of the roundabout?
Sorry, I was not. I'm at a production kitchen, and when we stepped into the refrigeration part, it cut me off.
Okay. The question has come up whether there is funding available for the roundabout.
Based on my discussion with the project manager, the answer is no.
Okay, so what would be the next step in funding then?
Then we would have to go back to the money committee and to probably the chairs of the lower ed to get support. I think the DOT and us need to be in lockstep on what we're asking for. So that would be the beginning of the process. I think everyone should know that, well, everyone realizes the state of the state for our economy. And that's just the situation. I can't give you any assurance of success, but I think the other way
Excuse me.
is that
I'm having trouble hearing him.
Yeah. We're getting a bunch of feedback.
Perhaps,
yeah, let me
Mr.
step out of this
Tanaka.
traffic. I'll step out of the traffic area. Go ahead.
and perhaps turn off the video. I guess my next question would be, if you have the Department of Transportation concurrence, would that make it easier to ask for funding?
I don't know if it'll make it easier or determine our success, because it certainly won't hurt us. Hello?
Okay. Yeah, we caught that. And you heard did you hear that questioning about possibly meeting regularly with the Kihei community?
What I'd probably suggest is, like with the neighborhood boards, we would ask you to be shown up at their regular meetings and participate that way.
Excuse me, Chair, I'm still having difficulty understanding him.
Yes. Can you repeat your last statement, Mr. Tanaka?
I would probably suggest that we could be part of their community meetings. Not sure if they have regular meetings like their like neighborhood board meetings, but that I would see we would ride on their calling of meetings with their members. That's what I would suggest.
Are you reversing a truck, Mr. Tanaka?
No, we finally got that taken care of. Thank you.
Is there anything further, Mr. Fujioka, for Mr. Tanaka?
No, those are my only questions.
Okay, may I allow Commissioner Chang to follow up, since they were originally her questions, if she had any follow-up, and then back to Commissioner Ohigashi.
Sure.
Hello?
Yes, one moment, okay. Mr. Tanaka. I'm seeing whether Commissioner Chang has any further follow-up for you, since it was originally her questions. Commissioner Chang?
My only follow-up to Mr. Tanaka is, is it DOE's intention to go back to the legislature in this coming session 2021 to request the funding? Well, one, to coordinate with DOT, and then two, to request the funding for the roundabout.
Yes, that is our intention.
All right. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. If you'll please hold and stay available but muted, Mr. Tanaka. Commissioner Ohigashi, please continue.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Mr. Tanaka is, what would be the requested appropriation amount?
From what the project managers and the planners, it's in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 million.
If we do nothing today or defer this matter until the funding picture is much more clear, would we be able to include in that appropriation request monies for an underpass? Or
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, underpass.
I need to consult with DOT on that, because I think their position is that an underpass in that riverbed, and based on the 100-year flood study, that they would not support that position. So it would be unwise for us to go in one asking for and the other asking not. And plus it's a DOT function. It's not our function on what that cost would look like.
My other question is this, is that your proposal, Mr. Fujioka, is to allow for the roundabout, but condition opening of the school, at least phase one, on the completion of the roundabout. Is that right? He's muted, I think.
Yeah, instead of the grade separated pedestrian crossing.
So you would say, gotta build a roundabout first, and only then you would open the school.
Yes.
Now, given the fact that you don't have money, to build a roundabout, would that decision be should be made now or later?
We would prefer that it be made as soon as possible so that there's some sense of direction. But I do hear the people who are concerned that they want to make sure it's funded.
So your answer is maybe. Yes.
Lawyer double talk, sorry.
So, is it correct to say that that because there is no funding at this point in time, that this issue may be premature to be brought up?
In that context, if the commission wants to be assured that the funding is in place, yeah, it's probably premature.
Now, you indicated that DOT would have to agree on the underpass. When we spoke to Mr. Sniffen the other time, he indicated that there are certain designs which may run $30 million that would be acceptable to the DOT in order to build an underpass. And wouldn't it make sense that we would give to the legislature that option, that the DOT, that Mr. Sniffen says, yes, that would be the kind of design. Wouldn't it make sense to give to the legislature that option to determine whether or not they would fund that option?
In terms of already trying to get an $8 to $10 million roundabout approved, trying to add in the same breath $30 million underpass is pretty ambitious, I think. And I don't know I don't think that's a viable proposal.
Well, I've listened to some of the community members and the representative for the Kihei indicating that they would abhor a condition for death to occur on that highway. Wouldn't the decision of whether or not funding be made for the underpass, wouldn't that be rightfully with the legislature?
I don't know the answer to that question. Sorry.
Well, it would solve a lot of problems, right? It would say, we believe that the roundabout is sufficient, so we're not going to fund the 30 million underpass also. Or they would say, yeah, we're gonna fund both because we want to make sure that it's all safe. Or they're gonna say, well, we're not gonna fund either, and it's up to you guys to delay, open the school on whatever terms you can open it on. Wouldn't that be a better, a more democratic kind of solution to this problem, rather than placing the Land Use Commission, the County of Maui, DOE, and the Kihei community all in trying to reach an agreement? Isn't that's what we elected officials for? And I know you don't have to answer that because I'm just maybe pontificating after a tiring night of watching elections.
And we still don't know, do we?
And the last question I have is, I asked Mr. Tanaka if they would be preparing at least some kind of budget or bill or estimates as to what would it cost. We had a cost from Mr. Sniffen as to 30 million for the underpass, but that was, I got the impression that that was off the top of the head. Is there anybody in DOT or DOE that's going to provide us with the actual cost of the underpass, as well as more definitive ideas of how much it'll cost?
You know, I think they're gonna, I'm sorry, I think they're gonna design it first. And I don't know if there's ever been any justification to do that.
Well, the answer is the request that I had probably won't be coming forth. Is that right?
You mean
In other words, I wanted some kind of budget or some kind of statement or some kind of estimate as to what the two costs is. So at least if we have to make a decision, we can make a decision as to what the cost may be. And I think that I'm offering you a reasonable out to make the legislature decide and give them that kind of information to make them decide whether or not the underpass should be built or not.
You know, in terms of drafting legislation with a view towards obtaining funds, you know, I don't know what the most viable strategy is.
Well, I'm just looking at right now, we don't have a viable strategy. In either case, we have community opposition. We have no particular studies. We don't have even cost estimates that we can rely on. So rather than making us, who is a voluntary board, appointed by the appointed and not elected to office, maybe it might be a best idea to place it in their hands. And I guess that wouldn't call for an answer also. One last thing, I'm concerned about the county's filings. And in the county's filings, it says that they have an ordinance adopting this, our condition for overpass or underpass. And because it's made part of the zone. My question to you is, would that have to be amended also if we grant your motion?
Yeah, I think it needs to be addressed, but you know, that's
what does that mean? Address? Does it mean that you have to go to county council and amend the zoning ordinance?
that is my assumption, although I would defer to the county attorney for the answer to that.
And the reason for my asking that is that technically we have no real enforcement power, and the counties would be doing that. So irrespective of what we change here, it would appear to me that the county can enforce its own zoning ordinance and deny a certificate of occupancy if you don't modify that zoning ordinance. Is that true?
I honestly don't know off the top of my head, but you know, the, getting the land use commission's approval is probably not the last step, but it is necessary.
So when are we opening up the school?
I hate to say it depends, but I think they just got a notice to proceed on phase 2. And I don't know the timetable for construction. It might be in one of the exhibits we submitted, but I don't know if that one had timelines.
And if we don't make a decision on this particular item, how long will it delay opening of the school?
Yeah, if the GSPC requirement remains in place and it hasn't been funded or built, yeah, it would delay.
And I'm just gonna make a comment. If that is the case, and if the legislature wants to have this school open in time, then wouldn't it be, it seems to me that they should address which way they want to go on this matter. Because irrespective of what we do here, you still face you still face a task in trying to attempt to change the county's understanding, and that would cause and may cause a delay in the school. So I leave it up to the DOE to determine how they want to proceed in this matter. And I guess that if you force us to make a decision, we will have to make a decision. No further questions.
Hey, thank you.
Commissioner Giovanni.
Thank you, Chair. Let me preface my questions by a remark that says, from my personal experience, I'm approaching this from a major concern or interest in the safety of the children that will be attending this school. Let me also send my thanks and concurrence with the lines of questionings and comments of Commissioner Chang and Commissioner Ohigashi. Just want to get what you said correct, Mr. Fujioka. Commissioner Ohigashi asked you for a design basis for an underpass option. And I believe your response is you don't foresee any justification for doing such a design effort in order to develop a cost estimate. Is that correct?
Based on the information we've been given and the current understanding that the actual gulch would need to be deepened or widened, it does appear cost prohibitive, yes.
Let me assert
I'm
that.
sorry, wait, excuse me. I didn't get the last part of your sentence, Mr. Fujioka.
I said that the design would be cost prohibitive.
Thank you.
That wasn't my question. My question was whether you could do a justification to do a design to determine what the cost might be. So then you could submit it to the legislature or some other party to determine whether or not it's cost prohibitive. I think you got the cart before the horse. So let me go back to my question on your testimony. I believe you said there's no justification for doing the design in order to develop a cost to support a presentation to the legislature as Commissioner Ohigashi had suggested. Is that correct?
Based on what we currently know, yes, I believe that's correct.
Is it your opinion or position that the existing land use commission condition for an underpass or an overpass, and the inclusion of such in a zoning ordinance by the County of Maui is not sufficient justification to do a design?
In terms of the additional requirement that a study be done and the conferral or concurrence with the Department of Transportation, given that we weren't able to get any recommendation or concurrence that the underpass is a the underpass in that particular location is a viable alternative. Yeah, I didn't see the justification.
There's testimony on the record from the Department of Transportation that it's feasible, but it would be expensive. Yet we don't know what that cost would be because you've been reluctant to do the study or the preliminary design to estimate the cost. So it sounds like you're attempting to draw a conclusion about its feasibility, not in technical terms, but in financial terms, prior to even doing the upfront work to determine what the cost might be.
Yeah, I see that Mr. Sniffen has joined the conference, and I'm trying to recall his testimony, and I don't think he called it feasible. It was like it's something that might be physically possible, but it would there were major excavations or deepening or widening of that gulch, which would make it cost prohibitive.
That may very well be the case. And Mr. Sniffen, thank you for joining us. But I don't know if you were on board hearing the line of questioning from Commissioner Ohigashi. But basically what he was suggesting as an option for DOE and DOT is to do a design for the gulch for an underpass, recognizing it may be quote unquote very expensive. And then to include that as an option to the legislature so that they could make at their level a policy decision, a financial decision of whether they want to invest that amount of money or not for the safety of the children regarding the underpass.
Got it. I apologize for not jumping on earlier. I was stuck on calls with US DOT.
Hey,
Yes.
excuse me, Mr. Sniffen. Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
Yes.
Okay. You may answer the question from the commissioner.
Sorry about that. I apologize for being late. I was on the call with US DOT trying to get more money for the state. So I didn't hear the line of questioning, so I appreciate you restating it. Overall, the cost estimate for a grade separation going over the highway and overpass would be 6 to 8 million, or 6 to 8 million, around that level. Given that we have hydraulic and hydrologic studies that say the hydraulic opening gets inundated up to 3 feet below the deck on the current underpass option in that existing gulch, widening that facility, and we just did a kind of a back of the envelope analysis, widening that facility or raising it is going to be upwards of 30 to 35 million. Just from that perspective, we're looking at it as a feasibility discussion on which we would go. If a grade separation was necessary, it'd probably be going over because of the cost prohibitiveness of going under. In order to get to a better analysis, we'd have to put in a hydrologic study to get done in that gulch. It's about 600,000 or so to get the study done, and about a year. After that, we would have a better understanding or a better idea of what we could and could not do in that area. So that's kind of where that discussion is. Given the information that we have at the time, the feasibility of going over is much more affordable than going under.
Thank you, Mr. Sniffen. Would you agree with the notion or disagree with the notion that the existence of the condition in the Land Use Commission order requiring an overpass or underpass and the inclusion in the zoning ordinance existing by the city and county may very well provide the justification you need to do the studies you just described?
I think it would give the justification. Now, I think one thing I would say is I wouldn't put this in the legislator's court. from my perspective, it's not up to them on how that, even if the 30 million is available, it still has to be prioritized by the department. And I cannot speak for DOE, right? I cannot speak for what their prioritization and their priorities are. But an additional 30 million on top of a $200 million project, I don't know. For me, I would have a difficult time if there are cheaper options to provide or to fulfill the condition that's put on the development. So I think
when you refer to cheaper options, it could be the overpass at 6 to 8 million.
That's correct.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Sniffen. I have a question for Mr. Tanaka from DOE.
Mr. Tanaka, could you please unmute yourself? Go ahead.
Hello, yes, Mr. Giovanni.
Yes, Mr. Tanaka, again, thank you for making the time today to meet with us. Is it the position of the Department of Education that you would intend to open the school in phase 1 before the roundabout was built if funding was not approved in a timely manner?
And I've got to defer to Stuart a little bit. I think the way it is now, we have to provide a crossing method prior to opening phase 1 of the school. Is that correct?
Yes.
So if we don't have those means, yes, we cannot open the school, and unless we change that. But right now, I think our hopes are that we fulfill that crossing with the roundabout. And as we stand here now and the information and data been given to us, that is a feasible option. I think the community is more positive about a roundabout, and then there's the funding part. I mean, whether in these times we could ask the legislators for an underpass budget when we would have the roundabout option. They would ask us all the questions. And one of the reasons that DOT has recommended, and we concur, that the on-grade roundabout is a viable option because studies have shown that people are going to take the quote-unquote shortcut. They're just going to go across at grade and will not use the overpass. So the question put to me was, why would we build something that nobody's going to use?
So let me comment on the points you made. So first of all, the good news is that I think all parties are in general agreement that a roundabout is a good thing and would make sense and should be there prior to and functional prior to the opening of phase 1 of the school. The bad news is there's no money for it. So the question is it going to be built or not? And very clearly, if it's not, will you open the school? Yes or no?
I don't think we can based on the current ruling.
Sorry, may I?
You want to add something to that?
Yes, please. For DOT, we would not support opening that school prior to the roundabout being built, bottom line. So as I put out to the community, the DOE is going to be pushing to get additional funding to get this built. If they cannot, we will build it. So I would really appreciate if this commission puts in the requirement that this roundabout be put in place prior to the opening of the first phase of the school. I think it's the right thing for the community, and I think that it's the right thing for the school.
I agree with you, Mr. Sniffen. Thank you for that position. And then, Ms. Stewart, I believe you, Fujioka, you also testified before Mr. Sniffen got online in response to Commissioner Chang's inquiry that there would be, if the school opens and under phase 1 with a roundabout, there would be studies to determine the value and viability of an overhead or underground crossing prior to phase 2. Is that correct?
Well, it would be, I think, 1 year after the school is open, according to the commission's order as currently written, there needs to be an amendment to that traffic area impact study. And, you know, I don't think it's limited to a grade separated crossing. It'll, if any other mitigation measures are indicated, you know, they'll need to be considered. And then I think there's another revision is required upon.
That's okay. My point is a little different.
Okay.
My point is that there's a lot of conjecture in this record about if the roundabout is actually built, what percentage of students would actually use it. And it ranges from high 90% to all the kids that live on the south would still use the pathway under the gulch, which is, so I think that there's value in actually building the roundabout, opening the school, and see where the kids are walking. And then we go from there. That's my position. And thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Giovanni. Commissioners, it is 11:46 a.m. I see that there are questions from Commissioners Cabral and Okuda. I myself have 7 questions for the Department of Education, some with multiple parts, which I'm actually willing to provide in writing for response at a future time. Given the nature of our proceedings and that this is merely a status update and my inclination is to take no action today, I would encourage my fellow commissioners to perhaps consider phrasing questions of request for future information rather than trying to make firm determinations today. Commissioner Okuda, followed by Commissioner Cabral.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree. And actually, Commissioner Giovanni covered all the questions I was going to ask. So I was just going to say, I've got nothing further to ask. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Cabral.
I think this would be to Petitioner Representative Fujioka or Tanaka. In light of the fact that, and I might be wrong, I wasn't here 10 years ago and all of this and the Land Use Commission, but my understanding is in terms of timing of such a event, the Land Use Commission approved the changing of the use of this land, and the Maui Department made a zoning regulation requiring an alternative walking method pathway for pedestrians and bicycles. That was day one, but yet that has been uniquely or whatever ignored repeatedly for year after year after year, and here we sit. My question is, after that fact, then I'm assuming you folks put in, is there going to be plumbing to the building? Is asphalt, concrete, and a roof being included? I mean, I am angry. So my question is, how can such an absolute requirement be ignored? Question one. And the second one is, how much is the lawsuit going to cost the taxpayers after the first child is killed because of this decision? And can you enjoin all of the decision employees along the way in the Department of Education and have them enjoined in that lawsuit so their life can be ruined, just like the parents of the child who's been killed or grandchild who's been killed? If this was a private business, this would be completely unacceptable. So, Mr. Fujioka,
Commissioner Cabral,
settlement going to be for the first child? That would be my question.
Commissioner Cabral, I appreciate the anger. I think many of us have anger on this. I think that some of my written questions might actually address some of what you're trying to comment on. And I'm just going to ask for clarification. Are you specifically asking Mr. Fujioka to respond to the lawsuit questions, or did you more intend this as a statement?
Well, I am angry, but I guess the question is, how in the structure, since Mr. Fujioka and Mr. Tanaka are involved in the structure of the DOE, how is the decision made to completely ignore a requirement that was there day one, before there was even a requirement to get a building permit or put a toilet in? How do you systematically ignore such a requirement and now say that it's inappropriate to even have had it done a study? That would be my question, is how is that ignored through the system?
Thank you, Commissioner Cabral. If with your deference, I'd like to actually share a screen. I've drafted some questions that I would like to see the Department of Education respond to, which I believe goes to those and other issues. Would you allow me that?
Absolutely, because I know you could do a much nicer job of it than I am.
So to clarify for the parties, these are the chair's questions that I would be asking orally, but I think it would take a long time to ask orally. So I'm going to try and share a screen and show you what I have drafted. I believe you can see these questions. Are the parties able to see these questions, commissioners? Are you able to?
I'm sorry, Chair. I'm driving and I have you on my iPhone, so I can't read it.
Okay, but your counsel can.
Yes.
Okay, so my first question is, did the DOE object or otherwise comment on the form of the order on this matter when the condition was originally passed? And I will provide these in writing that the staff can transmit them to the Department of Education. The second is, why did the DOE seek an LUC site visit in 2018 on this matter? Was it not the intent at that time to seek a changed condition? And if not, and why was the matter not pursued then? I might have the year wrong on when we did the site visit, though I remember the site visit clearly. Question 3, please provide information to the LUC regarding the original budget request for the Kihei High School to the legislature and to specify whether or not the funds for the grade-separated pedestrian crossing were requested. If they were requested, how was that amount determined? And if they were not requested, why not? 4, please provide the scope of the contract for all the studies which have concluded that there's no warrant for this crossing. And I will add, because I'm very familiar that if you give a scope of study a certain slant, you're going to get the answers that you need. 5, should the Land Use Commission issue subpoenas for documents related to questions 2, 3, and 4? I'm interested in your response. 6, will the new schools facilities organization be in charge of the further construction of this matter? If so, can Mr. Tanaka bind that organization to any representations? Will Mr. Fujioka continue to represent on this issue? I raised this at our last hearing, and the answer was we do not know. Finally, please specify who will be in charge of community outreach, how such outreach will be conducted, and an agenda for the first meeting. Those are the questions. I'm going to stop sharing screen now. I assure you I will provide these in writing so that you can get a hold of them. Those are the questions that for me to make a considered request, a consideration of the request on the motion from the DOE are things that I would like to have answers to. I'd like to open it up to any reactions from my fellow commissioners.
Let me speak. Thank you very much for you once again being so much more elegant than I am blunt. Thank you.
Commissioner Okuda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I concur 100% with the request. I think having the Department of Education and any other related government agency respond to your written questions and the response in writing will make this entire process more efficient and more clear. So I concur 100%. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Giovanni.
Chair, I also concur with the approach to develop your written questions and submit them for written answers. However, I think I'm going to suggest that you consider modifying one of your questions to directly address the question raised by Commissioner Cabral. It is my sense that somewhere in the process of time, following the day one, the LUC issued its order requiring this condition, that the Department of Education developed a budget for the high school that did not include specifically addressing or including this an overpass or an underpass for this condition. That's the point in time which we think that they have been negligent. I think they've been negligent. I'd like more information about how or why that decision was made not to include it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ohigashi.
On a separate, not that I disagree with you. I'm not disagreeing with you, and in fact, I'm agreeing with you, Mr. Chairman. But I wanted to know when is a time when the DOT and DOE are submitting their requests to the legislature for CIP funds or additional funds for this matter?
My understanding is that the governor has already been vetting requests at this time and has been for a number of weeks. But Mr. Fujioka.
I'm sorry, I don't know the timeline on that. I need to confer with Mr. Tanaka. And I don't know if he has even got information on that.
And if it's already been submitted, or because I would assume that such a large request would be submitted, are we able to get a copy of that submittal?
Do you care to respond, Mr. Fujioka?
I don't know if a submittal was made.
If a submittal was made, are you able to provide that information to the Land Use Commission?
I believe so, if you could add it to the list.
And the other question, the second part, if a submittal is to be made, would we be able to get a copy of that submittal?
Mr. Fujioka?
I believe so.
Okay.
So when you say I believe so, I tend to think you're saying yes.
This hadn't come up in my discussion, so I don't have anybody's approval to say that. So I said.
So subject to conferring with your clients, you will seek to do this, and if you're unable to do this, you will relate that your client has not agreed to do so.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Ohigashi, anything further right now?
Nothing.
Commissioner Chang.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do concur with your questions, I believe we need a really good administrative record documenting what's been done, what hasn't been done, because clearly this matter will probably be elevated to the legislature. So I'd like to make sure that these questions and the responses, and I'm not too sure what's the vehicle to do that, but accompanies and provides the legislature a very good understanding of the history behind this request, so that it does not, so that there is a full picture of why this matter is coming before them at this point in time. Because I would suspect that there are going to be many people in the community, including the legislators, who will ask, why do we have an empty school that we cannot open? So there needs to be some kind of documentation to explain that. So I appreciate, Mr. Chair, your articulation of a lot of the questions that I think the commissioners have been trying to explore with the DOE. Do not intend to put Mr. Fujioka or Mr. Tanaka in an awkward position, but this is clearly a matter that needs to be timely resolved. And if the legislature is already reviewing, or if the administration is already providing their budget requests, then it is incumbent upon them to make sure that they are addressing this matter. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I do support the questions you are presenting.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Ohigashi, and then I'd like to make some, and Commissioner Axon, we're overdue for a break, and I'd like to make some remarks about what assessing the status.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a small remark. It seems to me that the Kihei representative would be helpful in determining any kind of submittals to the legislature, given the fact that she is on the finance committee. That I just looked it up, and I understand she's on the finance committee of the House Finance. So it would make sense that the DOE would work through her and try and figure out whether or not what type of submittal should and can be made. Unless this website is wrong.
Thank you, Commissioner Ohigashi. Commissioner Axon, and then I will assess the proceedings. Commissioner Axon?
Can I ask a question to Mr. Snippen?
You may. Please proceed.
Let me just. Mr. Snippen, the last hearing we have, I have the impression that, you know, the funding for the runabout, I wouldn't say it's secure, that you have a path or a way to get that funding.
Yes, absolutely. So our first hope is that DOE can fund it as part of their project. They're going to go in for additional funding to get it, whatever it may be. If they cannot get it, I already have operational funds that I can repurpose for that use.
So you don't have to go to the legislature to get this funding.
When I go to the legislature, I get funding in bulk for my special maintenance budget. My special maintenance budget can be used and repurposed for this purpose.
So, okay, so you can go ahead. Let me just, do you need any permission from us or anybody to proceed with this one? Or you have the authority to just proceed with this one, no matter what the DOE says or the community says? So you can just go ahead, regardless of what happened today, or regardless of, you know, the motion of amendment is passed or not. So putting away all those, you have the authority, or the DOT has the funding ability to do this as soon as you get those, so we can open the school.
Yes.
Thank you. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Axon. Commissioners, it is 12:02. I think it is time for a lunch break. I am going to assume that we have concluded, at least for now, our questioning of the Department of Education. If Commissioner Giovanni would like to provide additional written language in terms of the scope of the question regarding the DOE's budget, that would be helpful to me, and I will bring that up one more time before we conclude our agenda item on this matter. After lunch, we still have to hear from the Office of Planning, Maui County, and the Office of Planning on this matter. Commissioner Chang, you're muted. Commissioner Chang, you are muted.
Sorry. So one question. So Mr. Sniffen, in the line of questioning by Commissioner Axon, when you reference this, is this the roundabout? Is that what you can build?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Fujioka, confirming you have nothing further on this right now?
Correct.
Okay, so it is 12:04. I suggest we reconvene at 12:50 for the continued discussions on this matter. First up will be any remarks from the County of Maui, followed by any comments from the Office of Planning and questions from the commissioners to both of those parties. People understanding our proceedings? Great. We are in recess until 12:50. Presumably. Okay, we are back on the record. It is 12, actually, at the bang of the gavel, 12:51, and we are now going to hear from Maui County on this matter. Good afternoon, Mr. Hopper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon. If it's okay with the commission, I'd like to ask Michelle McLean to sort of give an update of the planning department's position on the matter.
Yes. Can I say, I thought I heard somebody trying to say something.
Yes,
right
that was
as you
me,
were speaking?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I wanted to clarify a point, if I may. I think in answering some questions, I said that I did not see the harm of deferring this matter. We did want to present some clarification after I conferred with Mr. Tanaka over the recess. So I'm not sure if, should we discuss that now, or is there going to be some discussion about deferral later?
The plan for today is that I did confirm with you before the break whether you were done, and you indicated in the affirmative. The plan was to hear from Maui County and then from the Office of Planning questions. Deliberation by the commission, if at all, but the nature of our deliberation will probably be relating merely to the status update and not actually taking action on the substance of the motion. However, I can certainly call on you on that at that time if you want to add further comments.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Hopper. Please proceed.
Not a problem, Chair. If it's okay with the commission, I'd like to have Planning Director Michelle McLean summarize the department's position, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely. Aloha, Michelle. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. The position described in our statement has not changed significantly, but I did want to provide some further context given the information that's been presented today. The department supports the roundabout. Mr. Sniffen stated it plainly. The community wants it, and DOT will see that it gets built prior to the school opening if DOE doesn't have the funds. The mayor, and therefore the department, does not want the school's construction or opening to be delayed. We do not oppose the spirit of the petitioner's request, but we are not ready to concede that the need for the grade separated pedestrian crossing be left to a future warrant study or TIAR. The Kihei community knows the behavior of its kids better than a traffic study. We agree that an overpass would not see sufficient use to justify its expense, but believe that an underpass is a viable enough option to not be taken off the table prior to the opening of the school. It may not be feasible to build it to DOT's standards, even with a revised hydrologic study, but it could nonetheless possibly be built safely. DOT and DOE should be required to continue to work with the community and the county to support an underpass. If this ultimately proves unfeasible, then the county and the community would have to acknowledge that reality and so inform the LUC. While the DOE and DOT seem to take that position now, we are not ready to do so yet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Director McLean. Commissioners, are there questions for Ms. McLean or the county? Commissioner Okuda, followed by Commissioner Wong, I believe.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. McLean, if I could just get a very short summary from you about your professional background on which you base your testimony that you gave right now. Can you just give a very short summary of your education and experience as a professional planner?
Thank you for the question. I have a bachelor's degree in political science from Vassar College. I have been with the planning department since January 2011, first as deputy director, and I've been director since July of 2018. Prior to that, in the private sector, I was a planning consultant with my own practice, and then I worked with a real estate developer. And I am AICP certified by the American Planning Association.
Okay, thank you very much for that background.
Commissioner Wong.
Thank you, Chair. Director, question. In terms of, for the County of Maui, do they have to do a certificate of occupancy before the school can be opened to students?
I would have to confirm that because the state does have the ability to exempt itself from getting building permits. And I believe that ability to exempt itself may also apply to certificates of occupancy. However, they have applied for county building permits And so the county would look for there to be COs before the buildings are occupied. But I'm not certain if, because they applied for the county building permits, if they can exempt themselves from the CO requirement. I'm not certain about that. We would have to confirm that.
So another question I have is, I remember the City Council of Maui did a resolution for the Kihei High School. Can you refresh my memory of what it said, please?
I wouldn't be able to speak about the specific wording, but that was when the county petitioned this commission for a declaratory ruling on the wording of the original condition in the decision and order. That was when the DOE believed that there was some flexibility in the condition related to the grade separated pedestrian crossing, that if a warrant study showed that it wasn't needed at a certain phase, then they wouldn't have to build it. We disagreed with that, and I believe the council resolution, well, I know the council resolution took that position, but I don't know the specific wording of it.
So going back to my first question, let's say hypothetically, we amend the condition to say you shall build a roundabout, and when the second phase of the high school is being enacted, you shall build a underpass or overpass. And that condition, is passed and all that. So would the county of Maui then take over and follow through to make sure it's done?
The county is responsible now for enforcing your conditions. So if that is how the condition would be revised, then yes, we would be responsible for enforcing it. Just like we are now for the existing language that we have sought to enforce through the building permit process.
So I have a question. Commissioner Ohigashi was talking to the DOE, and they said something about they have started phase 2. Do you know what that is about?
I did recently look at the petitioner's filings for today's proceedings with one of the exhibits that shows the 2 different phases. And phase 2, it appears, allows for expanded facilities when the enrollment gets to a certain point. But phase 2, as I believe they've said in their own filings, there is no particular start date for it.
Okay.
Theoretically, phase 2 may never happen.
Right.
I don't think that's realistic, but theoretically.
Okay. No, it's just that it's somehow I thought I heard they said they started phase 2. So I don't know what phase 2.
Commissioner, I heard the same thing. I think it's a question for when I allow DOE to re-speak rather than for the county.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair. No further questions.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Ohigashi, followed by Commissioner Giovanni. Commissioner Ohigashi.
Michelle, Ms. McLean, I just want to be sure, is it the county's position then that we have to ensure the building of a roundabout prior to opening on phase 1 and an over and underpass may be delayed to phase 2? Is that the position or?
First, in part because of Mr. Sniffin's statement today that requiring the roundabout to be constructed prior to the opening of phase 1, the county absolutely would support that change. In terms of pursuing an underpass, we're concerned that postponing that consideration until phase 2 means that it's not going to be touched by DOE and possibly DOT until then. Whereas we believe that there's the potential for it to be constructed, and the county wants to be an active participant in pursuing that, working with the community. but we need DOE and DOT to be involved in that. And so if the requirement is put off specifically to a later point, I don't know if they would come to the table and if they would assist to the extent that they're able to. So that's why we would like to see that requirement not be completely put off to a later phase, because they still have a role to play in it happening. Even if it can't be built to DOT standards, the DOT still has a role to play in that happening.
Okay, does the county intend to file proposed language on the amendment to
We could.
satisfy that condition? Because it seems kind of nebulous to me, especially the second part on how that would work. So if we had something in writing that we could see, perhaps that would clear everything up. However, the others may feel differently, but.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we would be happy to work on that. And I would even consult with DOT and DOE on that language. I don't know if we'll be able to get that done today because the petitioner's filing came in just a few business days ago. But yes, we'd be happy to put something together.
Will you be requiring an amendment to the ordinance, the zoning ordinance that was granted in this matter by the county?
Thank you for that question. Yes, I do believe an amendment to the existing zoning condition would be needed because the existing condition references the original DNO's conditions. And so if those get amended, then I believe the zoning condition would need to be amended too.
Because it would appear to me that the county can require more stricter standards. So would your proposed condition that you're giving us in writing, would that be the amendment you would be seeking through the planning commission and eventually to the council?
Yes.
I don't have any further questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Ohigashi. Commissioner Giovanni.
Thank you, Chair. I concur with Commissioner Ohigashi's and welcome your willingness to draft some language consistent with your position that takes it out of the nebulous category and the indefinite category and makes it more certain. So I appreciate that. My question, Director McLean, is for purposes of clarity, and it has to do with a term that's been used quite a bit in the record here, which is feasibility. And from my perspective, feasibility, there is both technical feasibility and financial feasibility. Those are two very different things. One is the first is it possible to do it at any expense? And then the second is, can we afford it? That's my general notion. Would you agree with that general definition of feasibility?
Yes.
So in your statement earlier, I think you said that the overpass was, in the county's view, was infeasible. Could you further clarify that, or maybe I misunderstood it?
Yeah, we agree with DOT's perspective that the overpass would not get much use. And I don't think that its limited use would justify its likely expense. I didn't talk about feasibility of an overpass. I do believe that an underpass is feasible, and we can talk about what feasibility means in that context.
Okay, I think I agree with that. I think that whether you're considering the overpass or whether you're considering the underpass, in both cases, you have questions of technical feasibility and financial feasibility. Ultimately, decision makers will weigh in on those questions about either, but I just want to go to understand the county's position, at least for this point in time, on the matter of technical feasibility, taking the cost of it out of it. Does the county preclude the possibility of an overpass or an underpass at this point?
I'm sorry, I lost the last part of your question.
That was the question. So let me rephrase it. So Mr. Sniffen testified this morning that an overpass was feasible for about $6 to $8 million. Setting aside whether there's financial feasibility to find the money, that's pretty clear that it's technically feasible. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And then similarly, the underpass, which we've heard conflicting testimony, but general notion that it's probably technically feasible at a much greater expense to satisfy the criteria of the DOT. But putting aside the financial part of it, it's probably technical feasible at some price. Would you agree with that?
Yes. What the point I was hoping to make and apparently didn't is that constructing the underpass to DOT standards, I think is, as you're saying, technically feasible, but probably financially infeasible. But I don't know that it has to be built to DOT standards. And so if looking at the technical feasibility, if we broaden the possibilities for the specs of it, I think it might become financially feasible.
I concur with that position personally, especially in the context that even today, with no improvements, people are using the pathway as an underpass. And if the school opens, there can only be more people using it. So any improvement at any cost would be better than where we are today. Thank you, Director. I appreciate it. No further questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Giovanni. Commissioners, are there further questions for Director McLean? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Hopper?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Ms. Takeuchi Apuna.
Thank you, Chair. Office of Planning, we don't have any further comments, but I think we're supportive of the parties working together to come to some agreement. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for the Office of Planning from the commissioners? Seeing none. Mr. Fujioka, you wanted to make a brief statement to follow up regarding what you feel the impact might be of a deferral today. I'll just remind you that I think there's already been a great deal of sentiment expressed that our intention is to defer today and not take action.
Yes, I would like to have Mr. Tanaka explain first the differences in numbers in the phasing numbers, because there were two sets of numbers attached
Correct.
to the project.
Commissioner Wong's questions, and then
explain about the what the effect of deferral could be.
Okay, that is the entirety of what you want your witness to describe?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Tanaka, are you available via audio at least, if not also by video?
My video, this thing's gonna lag a little bit, so if okay, I will just.
Audio is fine, but you're not very easy to hear right now.
Okay, hang on one sec. Is this better?
That is slightly better. It could be even better.
Okay. Let me try again. Is this better?
It's about the same. It's a bit soft. How's our court reporter?
Yeah, it's a bit soft for me to hear too. It's challenging.
Okay.
Let me try this. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for everyone's time. A couple of things I want to clarify, that with the effort of the DOT and the DOE, the roundabout will be funded. The roundabout is critical for us to get working on to prevent any further delays of opening the school. So we encourage that that part of this discussion gets approved. We also understand that, and I think Commissioner Giovanni put it well, that it's not that we're not going to study future opportunities for the public crossing. We will, but that can come after we get the roundabout completed or started the roundabout to be completed so we can open the school on time. I think Michelle McLean put it also well, echoing the sentiments that the county, DOT, DOE, and the Kihei Community Association is fine with the roundabout. So what we're asking today is to get approval to proceed with the roundabout and put the underpass and the overpass at a different time. We want to start moving on this project, and that the roundabout will provide for a safe transition of our students across the highway. Safety is of the utmost importance for us. So that's all I'd like to say, and thank you everyone for your time.
Before I offer any commissioners the opportunity to ask you questions, Mr. Tanaka, I just want to clarify. If I don't have the transcript from our last hearing on this matter in front of me, but if I recall, Mr. Sniffen answered in the affirmative that there's nothing that this commission has to do to cause the roundabout to be built. There's nothing in our current order that prevents the DOT and the DOE from implementing a roundabout. So I do not understand your second point that somehow that needs to be tied to the pedestrian crossing issue for you to proceed.
That is my understanding, but the issue of will we
what is your understanding?
My understanding is that we can proceed with the roundabout, but if the provision for the overpass is still there, I'm not sure we're going to get the friendly reception from the legislators when we're requesting funds.
Commissioner Axon, followed by Commissioner Okuda.
Well, similar to what you said, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Axon, something's happened with your audio.
Can you hear me now?
That's a little bit better. Thank you.
Okay. I fully agree with your assessment that based on Mr. Sniffen's testimony, LUC doesn't have to do anything to get this roundabout going. They can do it themselves. It's going to be between DOT and DOE to make it happen. And whatever delays that it occurs on opening the high school, I believe it's on DOT. On the underpass financing, there's nothing really we can do. It's up to the legislature to make those commitments and to make sure it happens. And it's going to be up to DOT or DOE to go to the legislature and ask for the money. And there's no guarantee that we're going to get the money. So what I'm saying is we're based on Mr. Sniffen's testimony, there's no stopping DOE and DOT to go ahead with a roundabout. And don't delay the high school opening, and let the other issues, play by itself between the DOT, DOE, and the community. If you get involved now, for me as a appointed and not elected member official, it's no win-win, or it's a lose-lose situation for us. We're gonna take the jerk, and but we don't have the authority financially to make it happen. So that's all I'm saying, that we are guaranteed based on the testimonies that the roundabout is gonna happen, and I would go with that and let the other issues play by itself, because there's a lot of unanswered questions on all feasibility, financing, all those are come to play, later on. But rest assured, the opening of the high school is not going to be delayed.
Thank you, Commissioner Axon. Commissioner Okuda, followed by Commissioner Chang, but I'm going to first note Mr. Fujioka has raised his hand. You had something to say, Mr. Fujioka?
Yeah, I just wanted to interject because the while it may be true that the roundabout's going to be built anyway, as the order is currently written, the school cannot open until a grade separated pedestrian crossing is installed. So that would still be a holdup if the roundabout is built and there is no funding.
Thank you, Mr. Fujioka. I think we understand that point, but the question was, do we have to take action on the roundabout for the roundabout to be built?
Okay,
Commissioner Okuda, followed by Commissioner Chang, and I'll just clarify, right, we're doing a very small, this is just involving Mr. Fujioka's statements and the two questions posed to Mr. Tanaka. Commissioner Okuda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, Commissioner Axon asked all the questions that I had intended to ask, and he also asked some very good questions that I didn't even think of. So I have nothing further to add. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Chang. Following Commissioner Chang, if there's no further questions, I intend to, well, Chang, then Ohigashi. I intend to assess where we are in the proceedings, share my latest draft of the questions, and suggest we move on. So Commissioner Chang, followed by Commissioner Ohigashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Tanaka, for being available to provide this clarification. I wanted to ask you, when is the projected date for the school opening?
I believe it is school year 2023.
2023.
Yeah, we had 2 years of a protest, a construction protest that held us back on phase 2.
All right. So you would consider this is 2020 or is this 2021?
2021.
Okay, so just working backwards, and I appreciate DOT and DOE working together, that both you and Mr. Sniffen commit to build that roundabout no matter what. Either it comes out of DOE funds or DOT funds. So working backwards, what needs to be done to ensure that the roundabout gets built before the 2023 opening?
Well, there's a design phase. There's some work. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ed.
Sorry, can I answer for you?
Yeah,
if you don't mind.
No, actually, we're just, this proceeding's going on too long. It was a question for Mr. Tanaka.
Do the best you can.
Yes. I think it's design and construction. There's some, that's basically it.
All right. So it sounds as if you could go out to design and construction fairly soon if you don't have to go to the legislature. So the whole back and forth we had about the legislature, is really not relevant to the roundabout. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. So I understand that you could proceed timely with the design phase and construction of the roundabout to ensure that the school is open in 2023. Is that correct?
That is correct. The partnership that we have to have with DOT, because they're the designers of the roundabout, that is their expertise. So we take their expertise.
Okay. And when you say opening, is that, do you need to get a certificate from the County of Maui?
I believe that is correct. Certificate of occupancy.
Thank you, Mr. Tanaka. You've answered my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chang. Before I call on Commissioner Ohigashi, I want to note that the attorney for the Department of Education asserted Mr. Tanaka was going to speak to two things, including the clarification on the use of phase 1 and phase 2. But Mr. Tanaka, you haven't spoken to that.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. There are two phases where there's a construction phase. And for the construction phase, phase 1 has been completed. That is primarily the groundwork, the grubbing, the road. Phase 2 is actually the beginning, the construction of classrooms. And I think in the phasing plan, it shows that. So and then there's the phasing of opening the school. Phase 1 is the opening of, I think, classrooms for 800 students, administrative building, and the cafeteria. And then phase 2 is the rest of the building and the other facilities, whether it be the football field or the music room.
So to clarify, your reference earlier to your notice to proceed on phase 2 was the construction phase 2 of phase 1 as the term was used in the LUC's decision and order.
Correct.
Thank you. Commissioner Ohigashi.
That's the question I was going to ask. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anything further, commissioners? If not, I'm going to share screen again. And I'm going to, I considered Commissioner Giovanni's and Commissioner Ohigashi's suggestions for additional questions. So please affirm, at least somebody for me, affirm that you are seeing what I am seeing. The questions listed. Can somebody orally let me know?
Yes, I see them.
Okay, great. So question 1 is did the DOE object to or otherwise comment on the form of the order, specifically this condition at issue when the order was originally passed? Question 2. Why did the DOE seek an LUC site visit in June 2018 on this matter? Was it not the intent of that time to seek a changed condition? Why was that matter not pursued then? Question 3, and this is incorporating the comments from Commissioner Giovanni. The LUC order of July 29th, 2013 included condition 1B that required what is now referred to as a grade separated pedestrian crossing, or GSPC, prior to the opening of phase 1. Subsequently, the DOE developed a preliminary design and budget and requested funding for detailed design and construction of the school. There's 4 parts to this. A, did the preliminary design and budget include any consideration or funding for the GSPC? B, did the original budget request for the Kihei High School to the legislature by the DOE specify whether or not the funds for the GSPC were requested? C, if the answer to either 3A or 3B is yes, how was the amount determined? D, if the answer to 3A or 3B is no, how did this oversight or DOE decision making to explicitly not include the GSPC design in the design and budget request occur? What was DOE's rationale to proceed with the budget request that did not include any funds for the GSPC? 4, please provide the scope of contract for all of the studies that concluded there was no warrant for the crossing. 5, should the LUC issue 1 or more subpoenas for documents related to questions 2, 3, and 4? 6, will the new school facilities organization be in charge of the construction? If so, can Mr. Tanaka bind them? Will Mr. Fujioka continue to represent on this issue? 7, please specify who will be in charge of community outreach and how such outreach will be conducted and an agenda for the first meeting to be conducted. 8, please provide a copy of this year's budget request from DOE or DOT, if any, related to funding for a roundabout. Commissioners, do you have any further suggestions or comments on this? And if I seek your concurrence either through a motion or otherwise to transmit these questions to the Department of Education.
Chair?
Commissioner Wong, followed by Commissioner Okuda.
I first want to say thank you for writing those questions down. It makes it much easier and easier for us to see what all the questions are. So I want to thank Commissioner, you Chair, and also Commissioner Chang and all the other commissioners for allowing us to have this in writing. And so we can go back and review it once we get the answers. And if the other commissioners have other statements before this, I would like to make a motion to ask the chair to transmit this document to the proper channels.
Okay, can I please acknowledge Commissioner Okuda first before you make your motion, Commissioner Wong?
Sure.
Commissioner Okuda.
I would second the motion, Chair. That's
Okay.
all I have to say. Thank
Okay,
you.
commissioners, we have a motion before us to transmit the questions as displayed on your screens through screen sharing to the Department of Education for a future status briefing on this matter, made by Commissioner Okuda and seconded, or made by Commissioner Wong and seconded by Commissioner Okuda. I'm going to stop screen sharing so I can see everybody. Is there any discussion on this matter, commissioners? Commissioner Okuda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Clarification on my second. As part of this, I am assuming that there will be no decision-making on any pending request, and to the extent necessary, although I don't think it's necessary, but to the extent that it's believed to be necessary, any such decision-making will be deferred to a later date to be scheduled in the discretion of the chair or in the normal course.
That is certainly the intent of the questions. This is to aid us in getting to the decision-making which the DOE seeks. But we feel we need this information in order to make our decisions, at least this information. Commissioner Ohigashi.
I agree. However, I'd kind of like to make it more, well, I want to give the signal to the DOE that we probably will not be taking up this matter until these questions are answered.
And I guess I'll also clarify about my writing of the questions. I'm open to your thoughts on issuing a subpoena, but don't need permission from the person being subpoenaed or entity. Is there further discussion, commissioners? If not, there's a motion before us. Mr. Orodenko, will we please do a roll call vote?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion is to transmit the questions as presented to the Department of Education for further clarification and to continue these proceedings until those questions are answered. Commissioner Wong.
Aye.
Commissioner Okuda.
Yes.
Commissioner Axon.
Yes.
Commissioner Cabral.
Yes.
Commissioner Chang.
Aye.
Commissioner Giovanni.
Aye.
Commissioner Ohigashi.
Yes.
Chair Scheuer.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion passes unanimously with 8.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to the participants in this agenda item. We appreciate the information that you've provided today and your stamina. Commissioner Ohigashi?
Yeah, I just wanted to remind the County of Maui that separate, although they're not on the question, not part of the questions, that they seem to well, they propose to get together with the DOT and DOE and attempt to work out some kind of language that would be their position in writing.
Thank you, Commissioner Ohigashi. Anything further on this agenda item, commissioners? Commissioner Giovanni?
Yeah, just to clarify what Commissioner Ohigashi was referring to, that's language that was more specific about the GSPC timing. Is that correct, Commissioner Ohigashi?
That
Yes.
he is nodding in the affirmative.
Thank you.
Okay, commissioners. We now are moving on to our next agenda item. So thank you to Department of Education, Department of Transportation. You may leave the meeting. Our next agenda item is a discussion on the designation of a commission cultural specialist pursuant to HRS 2205-1. Mr. Ordenker, will you please brief the commission on this situation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, as the commissioners may be aware, 205-1 requires us to have sufficient Hawaiian cultural practitioner representation on the commission. In the past, it has been the practice to designate someone as the cultural practitioner for the purposes of meeting the requirements of 205-1. Whether or not we actually need a specific person to be designated is a question that has never really been answered. However, we are in a situation where regardless of whether or not we have to have a specific cultural practitioner appointed, we have not had one since Commissioner Mahi resigned over a year ago. And the commission has a couple of options. It can designate someone else. It can choose not to do anything. And that may be sufficient for adherence to the statute. Or the commission can take some kind of action to try and see if we can convince the administration that this is an urgent matter. But it's at the discretion of the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Giovanni, excuse me, Mr. Ordenker. Commissioners, this is just discussion. Commissioner Cabral, I will note that we do have 3 deputies attorney general available to us as well. Commissioner Okuda, followed by Commissioner Cabral.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At some time, if there's no objection, I would like to make a motion which would direct the executive officer and or the chair in either's discretion to take the actions necessary to get a commissioner appointed as the cultural commissioner. And the reason for that, if I can just speak briefly on it, is I don't believe this is, if we can talk frankly, just a Hawaiian thing, okay? And so that the record is clear, I'm not Native Hawaiian, but I did work on staff at the 1978 Constitutional Convention. These requirements, which are part of the statute, were passed by a constitutional convention that frankly had very, very few Native Hawaiians in there. So it reflects a statement of community values, community goals, community purposes, which frankly reflect the diversity of the people that make up the state. And so the failure to comply with the statute, or where it might appear not to comply with the statute, in my view, is, I don't want to say flying in the face of, but is contrary to what the delegates in the 1978 Constitutional Convention intended, which was that these items which deal with the recognition, protection of Hawaiian cultural practices and history and resources are a statement of broad community goals, broad community values, what makes us different. So I really believe that at some point in time, I would like to make a motion to direct the chair and authorize the chair and the executive officer to do whatever they believe is necessary to get this at the top of the administration's to-do list, so that we carry out, what everyone, I believe, in this community believes makes us different in the world. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Okuda. Commissioner Cabral, followed by Commissioner Axon, then Commissioner Wong.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I do agree completely with Commissioner Okuda that this is really critically important, and I've deeply appreciated our former Commissioner Mahi's opinion on things. I am clearly the least qualified in that regard, but I would like to think that I think Commissioner Don Chang is extremely qualified. I find that her input on such matters is usually very enlightful and knowledgeable. And I don't know if we can, it sounded like we could potentially appoint from within. And I would make a vote in favor of Commissioner Chang for that position because I trust and believe in her. Thank you.
Commissioner Axon, followed by Commissioner Wong.
Mr. Chair, I have some question to our legal counsel. I don't know if it's appropriate to call an executive session.
It would be appropriate. Is there, I don't, not knowing your question, is it okay in the flow of conversation to continue with open discussion before possibly moving into executive session?
Well, I would prefer to be my question to be answered first before further discussion.
So I understand you are making a motion to move into executive session to consult with the board's counsel regarding
our rights, our responsibilities.
And specifically in regards to the designation or existence of one of our members who is a cultural specialist. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair.
We have a motion to go into executive session. Is there a second? So Commissioner Cabral has seconded. Is there discussion on the motion? If not, Mr. Ordenker.
Set up a Zoom meeting.
Mr. Ordenker will set up a separate Zoom meeting. This Zoom for attendees, this Zoom meeting will remain open. The commissioners will log out and log into a separate Zoom meeting with council. We obviously do not know the duration of our consultation with council if the motion is successful. Is there any further discussion on the motion? If not, is there any commissioner who votes nay? All commissioners vote aye? Okay. The commission will go into executive session pursuant to the motion made by Commissioner Axon and seconded by Commissioner Cabral. For attendees, there will be the panel up noting that we are in executive session, and we will reconvene to this Zoom meeting room when we are done with executive session. Commissioners, you should receive an email from Daniel Ordenker directing you to the proper Zoom meeting room, along with our counsel. Okay, it's 2:04. We're back into regular session. Commission, we're on discussion of designation of a cultural specialist pursuant to HRS 205-1. Commissioner Okuda.
Yeah, Chair, just as a qualification, because maybe a formal motion has not been actually agendized, I'd like to modify my statement just to indicate that it's my very strong request that that the actions that I described be taken by yourself and or the executive officer. I don't believe actually a motion is necessary to authorize the chair or the executive officer to communicate to the governor's office in the most strongest terms possible what the collective belief is or collective position is of the Land Use Commission. I'm not stating or saying that what I talked about or described is the sentiment of the commission. That's my own personal sentiment. And again, I believe that the chair and or the executive officer are already authorized to take actions to so communicate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Axon.
I fully agree with Commissioner Okuda.
Commissioner Giovanni.
I fully agree with Commissioner Okuda and Axon.
Is there further discussion on this matter, commissioners? If not, again, this is not agendized for an action, but I think the sentiment of the commission is clear. We recognize the deep value that that seat has brought to our deliberations, and we desire the governor to appoint somebody into that seat. And we will urge the governor to do so. I will work with Dan on that matter. Is there any other business that we have before us today? If not, I'm going to declare a recess. I will remind you that on tomorrow's agenda is action related to the Hawaiian Islands Land Trust. I currently continue to serve on the board of the Hawaiian Islands Land Trust, and so we'll be recusing from that agenda item, and you will be in the able hands of Vice Chair Commissioner Cabral. Is there anything further? If not, I declare a recess until 9 a.m. November 5th, 2020.
Have a nice day, Jonathan, tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair.